A massive, shadowy beast, its form a chaotic tangle of dark energy, emerges from the tall grass by the riverbank. It lets out a low, guttural growl, its glowing eyes fixed on something in the distance. The creature pauses, its attention caught by a group of figures standing on the path ahead. It recognizes its target, labeling one of them as the Apostle of Hades with a sense of predatory recognition. They stand in a line, their expressions hardening as they face the threat. Shirori, Ayagasaki, Elmira, and Ryuga each prepare themselves, the weight of the coming confrontation settling over them. The group stands their ground as the beast lets out a deafening roar and lunges forward. Ryuga remains at the center, his gaze steady even as the ground trembles beneath the monster's weight. He doesn't flinch as the creature looms over him, its shadow engulfing his frame. This is the dragon god's successor, Hinamori Ryuga, and he meets the beast's fury with a calm, almost bored indifference. Before the monster can strike, Shirori steps forward, her hands glowing with divine energy as she invokes her power as the Shrine Maiden of Fortune to bind the creature's movements. Seizing the opening, Ayagasaki rushes in, her wooden sword ready to deliver a punishing blow. She executes a swift, lethal maneuver known as the guillotine waltz, while Elmira joins the assault, her own dark magic swirling as she complains about the weight. The combined force of their attacks keeps the beast pinned and reeling. With the enemy vulnerable, Ryuga finally makes his move, calling upon the dragon fawn. A blinding surge of celestial energy erupts from him, a devastating blast that consumes the shadowy beast in a pillar of light. He stands amidst the dissipating smoke and debris, the threat neutralized with a single, overwhelming display of power. A small, dismissive sound escapes him as he looks over the scorched earth where the monster once stood. As the dust settles, the others approach him, their tension replaced by relief and admiration. They offer words of praise for his decisive victory, though he has already begun to turn away, his focus already shifting to whatever comes next. He stands among his companions as they debrief after the skirmish. Ayagasaki commends his control, noting he only tapped into 60% of his strength, while Shirori grumbles about being relegated to a mere distraction to buy him time. As the adrenaline fades, the childhood friend notices blood dripping from his hand and immediately offers her aid to mend the wound. Before she can act, the younger girl playfully suggests a more unorthodox method of healing, prompting Ayagasaki to intervene and remind her that her sacred powers are far too precious to be spent on such a trivial scratch. This sudden surge of affection catches him off guard as the girls crowd around him, their proximity leaving him flustered and overwhelmed by the unexpected attention. Watching this display from the tall grass, Ikaru seethes with a familiar envy, lamenting the unfairness of his friend constantly being the center of such feminine devotion. He eventually makes his presence known, stumbling toward the group while claiming he was drawn to the area by the sound of a massive explosion. Continuing his act, he urgently warns them of rumors regarding a dangerous beast in the vicinity, insisting they retreat for their own safety. His words are met with a heavy silence as the group stares back at him, their expressions unreadable as they process his sudden arrival and frantic warning. Breaking the tension, Ryuga reassures his friend that the danger has passed, gesturing toward the clearing just beyond them. There, the charred remains of the creature lie motionless, and the young man plays his part perfectly, recoiling from the stench and marveling at the fact that someone had already dealt with the threat. Ryuga looks down, his expression unreadable as he contemplates the creature. He admits he doesn't know its original form, but he has a strong feeling it's the very monster from the rumors. Beside him, Ikaru stares at the remains with wide-eyed amazement, wondering aloud who could have possibly done this. Ryuga remains composed, assuring his friend that everything is fine now that the threat is neutralized. This is the life of Ryuga Hinamori, a wielder of supernatural powers and a silent protector who faces waves of enemies without the world ever knowing. After the secret battle, he shifts back into his everyday persona, suggesting to Ikaru that they simply head home. Ikaru, ever the reliable companion, readily agrees. He takes great pride in this specific role. To the world, he is Kobayashi Ikaru, the professional protagonist buddy. He sees himself as the one responsible for the slice of life segments of Ryuga's grand narrative, striking a pose that radiates self-assuredness in his supporting position. As they walk, he reflects on the necessity of his presence. In the grand tradition of epic tales, he is the essential comedy relief, the anchor that maintains the story's pacing by providing light-hearted moments between the intense, high-stakes battles Ryuga must endure. He understands the fundamental truth of their reality. This world is a stage meticulously set for a single story where Ryuga is the undisputed lead. While the hero is surrounded by a cast of remarkable allies and beautiful companions, the narrative cannot function with a main character alone. It requires the grounding presence of supporting roles. This realization is what drives him. He is content to remain in the periphery, serving as the protagonist's friend within Ryuga's story. When Ryuga turns back to check on him, he is met with the steady, unwavering support of a man who knows exactly where he belongs. This commitment to the sidelines wasn't always his path. As a young boy, he clutched his favorite action figure, dreaming of being the one in the spotlight. Back then, he yearned to occupy the main seat, the center of attention and the hero of his own journey. He spent his childhood glued to the television, his eyes wide with admiration for the heroes on screen. In every story he watched, he found himself instinctively rooting for the Red Ranger, the leader who stood at the forefront of every battle. He once viewed the world through the lens of a leader, looking down at the other colors of the Sentai team as mere background noise to his own brilliance as the Red Ranger. However, A pivotal moment in kindergarten shifted his perspective entirely, occurring during a production of the classic tale of Momotaru where he was cast not as the hero, but as a lowly animal companion. His assigned role was that of a frilled-necked lizard, a creature known scientifically as Reptilia squamata agemidi Chlamydosaurus kingii. It was a peculiar choice for a companion, defined primarily by its frantic, upright sprint on two legs. Though he had initially yearned to take the center stage as Momotaru himself, the sheer number of children in the class forced the production to expand the roster of animal companions to include everything from seals to cats, ensuring no one was left out of the performance. Despite the absurdity of his costume, he committed fully to the performance, even deviating from the script to improvise a heroic sacrifice where the lizard shielded his friend Momotaru from a lethal blow. As he lay dying in the hero's arms, he urged his comrade to stay strong, telling him not to weep until his quest was complete and to wipe away his tears for the sake of the mission. This dramatic exit made him the only supporting character to be written out of the story in such a tragic fashion, leaving the audience in a state of emotional upheaval as the lizard met its end. The aftermath of the performance brought unexpected praise from the adults, who noted that his heartfelt portrayal of the lizard had elevated the boy playing Momotaru, making him seem like a true, inspired hero in the eyes of the crowd. In that moment, a profound sense of fulfillment and elation washed over him, marking the true beginning of his journey as a professional supporting character. He began to find himself drawn more to the Green Ranger than the Red, a shift in perspective that started early in his life. This preference only deepened as he entered elementary school, where he found himself more invested in the supporting cast, the professors, the chiefs, and even the elderly side characters, despite his mother's lament that toy manufacturers rarely bothered with such figures. Walking home alone, he reflected on how alienating it felt to be the only one not cheering for the lead. To him, the world only felt truly fleshed out because of the depth provided by those often overlooked supporting roles. Suddenly, his train of thought was interrupted as he spotted a potential opportunity, a realization striking him with sudden clarity. He resolved then and there to prove the inherent appeal of the friend character, drawing inspiration from his past performance as a frilled-necked lizard to elevate the main character's presence. His gaze settled on Ishida-kun, a shy transfer student from Okinawa who spent his recesses practicing soccer alone, and he immediately stepped in to offer his services as a goalkeeper. It didn't matter if the game was soccer or ping pong. His only goal was to provide the necessary support to help another shine. He began meticulously crafting a persona for the boy, instructing him that his shooting technique would henceforth be known as the Chinsuko Bazooka, and his catchphrase would be a casual "will manage somehow." To add a final layer of distinctiveness, he insisted the boy always be seen in the mood to munch on sugarcane, creating a clear and memorable identity. The plan was a resounding success, as the boy's new, easily understood personality allowed him to become a central, well-liked figure within the classroom hierarchy. When the boy later expressed his heartfelt gratitude for the transformation and the friends he had gained, he simply brushed it off, insisting that as a boring, characterless subcharacter, his only role was to facilitate the growth of others. He accepts the gratitude with a humble smile, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a job well done as he watches the person he helped walk away. He finds this joy in his secret hobby, molding others into the stars of their own stories. He recalls his successes with pride, transforming the shy Yashikun into a popular student who found love, guiding the delinquent Watanabe-kun to become the school's top dog, and even pushing Sekiguchi-kun to become the smartest student in the school. To him, playing the supporting role and producing these main characters is the ultimate thrill. He feels a deeper realization begin to take hold as he clutches his head in contemplation. He understands now that he wasn't just looking for anyone to support. He was searching for a specific kind of person, someone whose very presence makes the entire world feel like a mere backdrop for their existence. His gaze sharpens with a singular, burning ambition. He is no longer content with minor roles. He is hunting for his ideal, a protagonist among protagonists, the one true hero. He arrives on the first day of high school, scanning the bustling entrance as he searches for that special someone. He has spent his days looking for a protagonist worthy of his support, and as he steps onto the campus, a sudden jolt of recognition stops him in his tracks. There, standing with an effortless air of importance, is the person he has been looking for. The young man's sharp features and composed demeanor radiate the unmistakable aura of a central figure, standing out from the crowd of ordinary students. His presence is truly off the charts, a magnetic force that draws all attention toward him and leaves Ikaru mesmerized. He is the type of individual who would earn the respect of even the most scarred veteran. In a vision of a distant battlefield, a muscular warrior with a chest marked by an X-shaped scar acknowledges the boy's strength, noting that his eyes show absolutely no hesitation. He is a natural-born Red, a legendary archetype of a hero that makes Ikaru recoil in shock. Realizing this boy is far beyond any main character he has ever produced. He meets Ikaru's gaze as the other boy approaches his desk to introduce himself. Ikaru offers his name with a friendly smile, and in response, the hero calmly reveals his own identity, Ryuga Hinamori. It is the beginning of the partnership Ikaru has always dreamed of. He stands there, stunned, the name echoing in his mind like a thunderclap. It is a name that carries weight, a name that demands attention and fits the mold of a legend perfectly. Comparing their names, the boy realizes the vast gulf between them. While his own name is simple and common, the other's is complex and powerful, a literal forest of fire that makes his own seem insignificant by comparison. Despite the boy's enthusiastic praise for the name's heroic quality, the young man remains unimpressed, admitting with a somber expression that he finds no joy in it and actually dislikes the attention it brings. He leans against the wall, his gaze distant and heavy with a burden only he seems to understand, explaining that the name feels less like an identity and more like a set of shackles, a destiny he is powerless to evade until his final breath. This revelation only fuels the boy's excitement as he watches the other walk away, convinced that he has finally found the genuine article, a person with the spirit and the name of a true protagonist. Hurrying to catch up, he offers a friendly hand and suggests they get along, even boldly asking if he might use a more familiar name, though the other remains cold and detached, barely acknowledging the gesture. The young man stops and delivers a stern warning, telling him to stay away for his own safety. A classic rejection that only serves to pierce the boy's heart with admiration for such a perfectly executed heroic trope. The day continues into the classroom, where the formal introductions begin, and the young man stands before his new peers to state his name once more, his presence commanding the room. He then reveals a past spent in the secluded mountains of China due to family circumstances, a detail so perfectly aligned with the mysterious origins of a hero that the boy can hardly contain his glee at such a flawless backstory. As the class settles, the boy watches from his seat, his mind made up. He will find a way to stand beside this destined hero, no matter how much he is pushed away. He stands abruptly as the teacher calls for the next student to introduce themselves. While the rest of the class remains oblivious, his gaze lingers on the boy sitting nearby, who seems lost in a world of heavy burdens. In that moment, a silent vow takes root. He will be the support this hero needs. With a sudden burst of energy, the young man announces his name to the room, boldly declaring himself to be Ryuga's friend. The proclamation is so loud and unexpected that it leaves the supposed hero staring back in stunned silence, caught off guard by such a public display of camaraderie. He watches as the hero's composure falters, a hand rising to a flushed face in a rare moment of vulnerability. To the observer, this reaction is the final piece of the puzzle, confirming that he has finally found the perfect protagonist to stand beside. Ikaru reflects on the year since meeting Ryuga. He notices his own influence on the other, seeing more expressive, even annoyed, reactions from the usually stoic figure. Ryuga bursts into laughter, finding Saikira's latest claim completely absurd and impossible. The source of the amusement is Saikira's insistence that he has mastered the art of communicating through flatulence. Ryuga remains skeptical, even as the other doubles down on the ridiculous claim. He continues the tall tale, alleging that his peculiar talent even provided the correct answer when asked for the capital of Belgium. Ryuga dismisses the story as utter nonsense. A playful chase ensues as Ryuga shouts about a foul odor, while Ikaru watches from the sidelines. He muses that Ryuga is more reserved than expected but possesses a hidden talent for playing along with jokes, perfectly complementing the excitable idiot role Ikaru has adopted. Approaching with a conspiratorial air, Saikira announces that he has some significant news to share. Ikaru waits, wondering what his friend has discovered now. He reveals a folder marked confidential, proudly declaring it to be the latest update to the best babes list. Ryuga watches the exchange with a look of weary disappointment, questioning why such energy is wasted on such trivial pursuits. Saikira admits he doesn't really care about the truth of it either. The conversation shifts as Saikira enthusiastically proposes a trip to the pool to admire the scenery, but Ryuga flatly declines the invitation. Ikaru realizes he must maintain his persona and suggests they find another activity instead. He watches in stunned silence as Ryuga collapses, a strange, overwhelming power seemingly going berserk within his body. The air around the young hero crackles with a visible aura, and his eyes begin to glow with an unnatural light as he cries out in pain. This display only confirms what he has long suspected about Hinamori Ryuga. From the way he dodges questions about his past to his habit of slipping out of class and returning battered but victorious, surrounded by beautiful women, everything points to him being a true protagonist, especially now, with that unmistakable aura radiating from him. The realization fills him with a secret, manic joy, and he can't help but celebrate his own deductive prowess. However, he quickly reins himself in, reminding himself that his role in this story is to be the oblivious, happy-go-lucky friend who never notices anything out of the ordinary. While the hero remains slumped on the floor, he struggles with his conflicting roles. Although a genuine friend would rush to offer comfort, he knows his narrative duty is to wait. A heroine should be arriving any moment to provide the necessary care. His patience begins to wear thin as the seconds tick by, without a single girl appearing. He shouts internally, demanding that a goddamn heroine show up to fulfill her role and nurse the protagonist back to health, rather than leaving it to some random guy. The situation grows more intense as a low rumbling sound echoes through the area, and Ryuga's agony seems to reach a peak. He feels a pang of genuine pity for the suffering hero, wondering if the harem gods have abandoned him in his moment of need. Suddenly, the energy dissipates, leaving Ryuga gasping for breath on the cold floor. He stands by, blinking in confusion as the expected dramatic event fails to materialize, leaving the scene feeling strangely hollow. A surge of frustration boils over within him at the blatant disregard for narrative tropes. He fumes, mentally threatening to shave the head of the next heroine who fails to make her scheduled appearance during such a critical moment. Putting his irritation aside, he finally approaches his friend to check on his well-being. He asks if Ryuga is feeling sick, noting to himself that since no heroine event fired today, the responsibility of basic concern falls to him. The hero looks up, a soft and genuine smile breaking across his face. He thanks his friend for the concern, his voice carrying a warmth that suggests he truly values the bond they share, regardless of any missing heroines. He dismisses the intensity of the recent event, insisting it was nothing to worry about, though his companion remains unconvinced, knowing the gravity of what just transpired. Despite the lingering glow in his eyes and the faint rumble of power still radiating from him, the observer chooses silence, as such supernatural matters are strictly off-limits. Instead, he offers a mundane inquiry about his friend's lack of sleep. The quiet moment is shattered when the door slides open to reveal the imposing figure of the third-year student, her expression stern as she commands him to follow her immediately. Watching them, the observer recognizes her as a vital ally in the struggles to come, a powerful presence whose role in the unfolding drama is already becoming clear. Nearby, their boisterous classmate erupts in a fit of dramatic jealousy, loudly speculating on the nature of the relationship between the two, while the observer considers the predictable role of the perverted friend in such a scenario. Ignoring the theatrics, the tall woman begins to lead him away, prompting the classmate to desperately offer himself as a substitute, shouting absurdities about where they might be going. Her patience finally snaps, and with a swift, disciplined strike, she sends the nuisance sprawling across the floor, delivering a sharp rebuke for his lack of restraint and perverted mind. Later, standing before the traditional gates of the training hall, the observer feels a pull of curiosity, wondering if a quick look inside might reveal more than he should know. He reflects on his previous commitment to staying on the sidelines, but the mystery of the dragon-like aura and the entity within his friend has become too compelling to ignore, and he soon spots his target within the grounds. Inside the dojo, the woman has traded her school attire for traditional training gear, her presence commanding as she prepares for a private session. She avoids the official club, believing her superior skills would make fair competition impossible. She continues her rigorous instruction, her wooden sword a testament to the hidden battles fought in this town, plagued by the inexplicable. While others live oblivious lives, she and her charge are the thin line between light and darkness. From his hidden vantage point, the observer notes how his own mundane role serves as the perfect foil to their heroic struggle. Having moved inside the dojo, she stands over the seated youth, questioning him about the volatile nature of the guardian deity residing within him. The boy confirms the gravity of the situation, acknowledging the entity's growing instability. He looks down, admitting that while he has managed to keep the power suppressed until this moment, the burden is becoming increasingly difficult to bear. She watches him with a mixture of concern and clinical observation, noting that his recent frequent use of this power is accelerating his path toward a true, and perhaps dangerous, awakening. Meanwhile, the hidden witness to this heavy conversation finds himself distracted by the terminology, mentally critiquing the lack of creativity in the name Dragon God. The eavesdropper continues his silent mockery, wishing for a more exotic title for the entity, even as the young hero declares his resolve to not be consumed by the power, drawing strength from his mentor's belief that he is the only one capable of taming the beast. He cycles through more grandiose names like Leviathan or Jormungandr as the training session concludes and the pair prepares to depart. The observer's internal monologue is cut short as the boy steps out into the evening air, nearly jumping out of his skin at the sudden appearance of his friend waiting right outside the door. He is suddenly silenced as the swordswoman turns her attention toward the entrance, her sharp senses picking up the sound of voices where there should be silence. She narrows her eyes as the eavesdropper lunges forward to muffle his friend's cry, frantically whispering about a mission of utmost importance to cover his tracks, even as he realizes he has no plausible explanation for his presence. He leans in with a devious grin, whispering a scandalous proposal to his companion. They should seize the opportunity to spy on Rei while she changes. His suggestion is met with immediate pushback as Ryuga sits on the floor, questioning if this voyeuristic scheme was the only reason he had been lingering nearby. He doubles down despite the warning that they will face dire consequences if caught, painting a vivid, almost mythical picture of the paradise that awaits them behind the door. The memory of her sheer power flashes through his mind, a terrifying image of her effortlessly cleaving a massive truck in two with a single strike. He breaks into a cold sweat, fully aware that he is risking a similar fate, yet he convinces himself that such thrilling developments are necessary to spice up Ryuga's mundane life. Steeling his resolve, he declares his intent to witness the scene at any cost, while Ryuga follows behind with a mixture of reluctance and exasperation. His eyes widen as they find a vantage point, observing her in a moment of private vulnerability while his mind races with the self-congratulatory pride of a dedicated sidekick. The silence of the hallway is suddenly shattered when he loses control, letting out a thunderous sneeze that echoes through the corridor. His blood runs cold as she whips around instantly, clutching a towel to her chest with a look of pure, murderous indignation. While he desperately tries to claim the outburst was a calculated maneuver, her fury boils over as she brands them both as scum, brandishing her wooden sword and driving them away in a whirlwind of righteous anger. She stands tall, her shadow looming over the two boys as they cower on the ground. With her wooden sword held firmly at her side, she demands to know if they have any defense for their actions. When met with silence, she coldly offers them a choice of execution: hanging, stabbing, clubbing, or being blown to bits. Ikaru, desperate to save himself, frantically claims he was dragged into this against his will, while Ryuga remains silent and ashamed. He continues his frantic defense, shouting that the accusations are baseless and that he tried to stop the plan, even as Ryuga recalls him rambling about finding a legendary paradise. Despite his pleas that he meant no harm and is a good boy, the warrior's expression only darkens. She leans in with a terrifying, shadowed smile, her eyes glinting with malice as she asks if he has any final words before she delivers his sentence. She is suddenly caught off guard when he stammers out a warning, pointing out that her current posture allows those groveling below to see directly up her skirt. The fierce warrior's face instantly flushes a deep crimson, her composure shattering into pure, unadulterated rage. With a deafening roar for him to die, she unleashes a strike so powerful it sends him reeling, his honest warning met with a violent, reflexive retribution. He is sent hurtling through the air, the world becoming a blur as the force of the blow overcomes him. As his consciousness begins to fade into darkness, he realizes the sheer scale of the mistake he made in trying to be helpful at the worst possible moment. Meanwhile, the hero stands in quiet contemplation, a look of suspicion crossing their face. They recall the impact and the specific sensation of the violence that just unfolded. With a furrowed brow, they question if a second, hidden strike had been delivered during the chaos, sensing that something about the encounter wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. Hikaru wanders the town on a quiet Sunday, noting that even without plans, he often finds himself drawn into events surrounding Ryuga. He spots his friend nearby, observing that the hero never drops his persona, even during their downtime. Suddenly, a young woman appears, her long hair catching the light as she looks up in surprise. It is a fateful encounter on this otherwise ordinary afternoon. He recognizes her immediately as Yukimiya Shirori, a refined lady from their school who belongs to a different class but is a central figure in Ryuga's inner circle. While she is adored by many for her grace, he can't help but make a silent, somewhat petty observation about her slender frame. Approaching her with a casual wave, he assumes she is there for the same reason he is. He greets her, certain that she is waiting for Ryuga to arrive for their scheduled meeting. As he watches her, he ponders her dual nature, the model student with perfect grades who nonetheless skips classes to be by Ryuga's side. He suspects there is more to her than meets the eye, perhaps even hidden supernatural powers that she keeps tucked away. She turns to him with a warm, radiant smile that seems to brighten the entire street. To his utter shock, she addresses him directly, asking if he is indeed Hinamori-kun's friend and correctly identifying him as Ikaru Kobayashi. The boy stands frozen, his expression blank as the weight of her words sinks in. He is completely caught off guard by the fact that someone of her status would even know he exists. A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washes over him as he celebrates this small victory. He is deeply moved, convinced that her ability to remember an insignificant nobody, like himself, is a testament to her incredible kindness and consideration. However, his excitement quickly turns to a strange sort of frustration. He realizes that by being so perfect and accurate, she has inadvertently denied him the chance to see a more casual, playful side of her personality. He laments the missed opportunity, recalling a moment where he had hoped she would stumble over his name. Instead of the playful mistake he envisioned, she remained the flawless, exemplary student, leaving him to wallow in his own bizarre expectations. He reflects on the fierce competition among the heroine candidates, realizing that without a bit more presence, he might be completely overshadowed by their overwhelming intensity. As he ponders his place in the social hierarchy, Shirori approaches him with a hesitant blush, quietly asking if he might have a moment to speak with her. She admits her curiosity regarding Ryuga's daily life and personality, a request he finds perfectly natural for a heroine. He offers an encouraging thumbs up, impressed by her textbook display of interest. He begins his report by bluntly labeling Ryuga a weirdo, a description that clearly catches her off guard and leaves her momentarily stunned. He elaborates on Ryuga's domestic skills and mysterious absences, eventually pivoting to praise his friend's character and potential as a devoted partner who would treat a girlfriend with the utmost respect. This tactic is part of his specialized friend skill, where he intentionally lowers his own standing or uses self-deprecation to make the protagonist appear more impressive and desirable by comparison. He concludes by warning her of the stiff competition she faces for Ryuga's affections, though she quickly and bashfully tries to deny that her interest is romantic in nature. Despite her protests, she thanks him for the insight, prompting him to suggest a movie date as a strategic way to get closer to the hero's heart. He suddenly freezes, struck by a chilling realization. As a mere supporting character, he has overstepped by building such a deep rapport with a primary heroine. In a fit of absolute panic, he seizes her shoulders and demands she strike their entire conversation from her memory, insisting they never even met and that she must never mention this to Ryuga. He makes a hasty retreat, shouting a playful yet desperate threat over his shoulder about a roaring elbow strike should she dare to reveal his involvement. Shirori stands frozen, her eyes wide as she tries to process his sudden, frantic departure. Just as he collapses to the ground in relief, Ryuga strides into view, casually apologizing for the delay. The timing is impeccable, allowing the protagonist to take center stage while the mob character remains safely out of the spotlight, his self-appointed mission seemingly complete. The piece is short-lived, however, as Oyama suddenly bursts onto the scene, his face contorted in a mixture of shock and disbelief. He calls out to the pair, his eyes darting between them as he tries to make sense of the situation. He immediately erupts into a panicked frenzy, screaming at the top of his lungs about why they are together. Ignoring Ryuga's flustered attempts to deny any romantic involvement, he becomes convinced that he has stumbled upon a secret date, his voice echoing through the area. The outburst intensifies as he brands his friend a traitor, lamenting his own lonely Sunday while accusing the other of being a filthy horndog. Amidst the chaos, the realization that his relationship with Shirori is being misinterpreted sends a wave of panic through the group. He continues his relentless tirade, bringing up childhood friends and neighbors to highlight what he perceives as a betrayal of their shared mob status. The sheer absurdity of the situation forces a scream of pure exasperation from the target of his ire, who can only lament the chaotic life of a supporting character. Amidst the shouting, she remains silent, her gaze downcast and her expression unreadable. The weight of the situation seems to press down on her, perhaps reflecting on the strange dynamics of the group she has found herself in. By the following morning, the atmosphere has shifted from frantic to inquisitive. Ryuga leans in close, his voice hushed as he demands juicy info about Shirori, clearly still preoccupied with the events of the previous day. He remains steadfast in his role, however, insisting with a weary sigh that there is nothing more to their relationship than simple friendship. He tries to focus on his schoolwork, hoping to steer the conversation back to normalcy. The suggestion of a group karaoke session follows, with an invitation extended to Elmira to join the fun. Yet, the offer is met with a quiet apology from Shirori, who declines the invitation, leaving a lingering sense of unresolved tension in the air. He watches as Elmira McCartney, a transfer student from Eastern Europe and another prominent heroine candidate, makes her presence known. Despite her immediate popularity and the formation of a dedicated fan club, she haughtily declines an invitation, claiming a distaste for crowded environments. Her striking red hair, styled in elaborate drills, serves as a vibrant marker of her unique status among the students. Despite her initial refusal, Ryuga persists, playfully urging her to reconsider and join the group's outing. Ultimately, she relents, and the group, including a boisterous Oyama, finds themselves at a karaoke bar. As Ryuga's constant companion, he is dragged along as collateral damage, adhering to the unspoken rule that where the hero goes, the sidekick must follow. He listens as the conversation turns to music inside the booth, but Ryuga hesitates to take the microphone, admitting a lack of vocal talent that leaves him watching with a flicker of genuine concern. His mind wanders to the possibility of Ryuga releasing a subpar character song, imagining the ridicule that would follow if the hero's theme music were anything less than perfect during a battle. He sees the tension break when Ryuga excuses themselves to find the restroom, leaving him with a nagging suspicion that there might be a more significant reason for the sudden departure. He contemplates whether this is one of those scripted moments where a heroine is supposed to chase after the lead, but his internal debate is interrupted by Elmira's sharp gaze. She catches him staring and demands to know if there is something strange about her, before shifting her disdain toward the lackluster quality of the establishment they've chosen. Her sudden remark causes him to choke on his drink, unaware that she is privately wrestling with a thirst for Ryuga's blood and the promise she made to restrain her vampiric urges. She expresses a lingering disappointment, having hoped for enough chaos to discreetly satisfy her vampiric cravings. Meanwhile, the boy announces his departure for the restroom, intending to fetch some towels as well. He hurries away, tossing a final warning over his shoulder for his companion to maintain their disguise and remember their roles. The recipient of the advice simply sighs, catching the towel thrown their way. The vampire princess suddenly closes the distance, her face inches from the other girl's neck as she struggles with her instincts. Watching from a distance, the boy reels in shock, his mind racing as he realizes the true, dangerous nature of the girl he thought was just another student. He eventually returns to the seating area, offering a friendly pat on the head to the silver-haired girl. She admits to feeling overwhelmed by the large group, prompting him to joke that he is her only true constant companion. She gazes down at the small card in her hand, her expression softening as she confesses that his presence is what truly puts her at ease. This admission sends a surge of pride through him, and he briefly imagines himself performing a celebratory dance for successfully fulfilling his role as the supportive friend. He reflects that perhaps the vampire should have been the one to share this moment instead. The bond between the weary warrior and the supernatural princess seems to strengthen, two souls who have never known the simple peace of a normal life finding common ground. He contemplates the strange synergy of their situation, believing that these shared hardships are precisely what will forge an unbreakable connection between them. Later, finding a moment of relative privacy in the hallway, he decides the time is right to address a lingering suspicion. He calls out to his friend, preparing to ask the question that has been weighing on him. He stands firm, his gaze fixed on the silver-haired girl as he directly accuses her of keeping a secret from him. She looks up, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. She falters, her voice trembling as she struggles to find an answer to the pointed question. Beside her, Ikaru maintains a stoic facade, though his mind is racing. He realizes that even a supposedly dim-witted friend must occasionally reveal a sharper, more observant nature, even if the inquiry he just posed is fraught with risk. She casts her gaze downward, the weight of her secret heavy upon her shoulders. Ikaru watches her intently, silently pleading for her to maintain the deception. He doesn't truly want a confession. He believes she is merely trying to protect him from the dangerous conflicts that define her life, and he urges her, in his thoughts, to simply dodge the question and play dumb. Instead of retreating into silence, she suddenly looks up with a spark of newfound resolve, her eyes wide and determined. She begins to speak, the words, "the truth is," hanging in the air with startling clarity. The sudden shift catches Ikaru completely off guard, his own eyes widening in shock as the very confession he feared begins to take shape. The tension of the moment is shattered not by words, but by a chilling realization of their surroundings. The karaoke clerk lies slumped on the floor, unconscious, and a heavy silence has fallen over the entire establishment. Ikaru scans the hallway, noting that the singing from the other booths has ceased entirely, replaced by an eerie, unnatural stillness that suggests something far more sinister than a simple conversation is unfolding. He gestures frantically at the chaos, his composure completely evaporated as he demands to know what is happening. While he reels from the sight of the fallen bodies, Ryuga stands firm, her expression hardening as she assesses the situation. The mundane world of school uniforms and social dilemmas has been abruptly replaced by a scene of inexplicable peril. Hikaru and Ryuga stumble upon a grim scene in the hallway. A woman lies motionless on the floor. Hikaru's heart races as he realizes they have crossed the threshold from their mundane school life into a dangerous conflict. He breaks into a cold sweat, the reality of the situation sinking in. The high-stakes battles that usually involve Ryuga's specialized team are now unfolding right before his eyes, and he feels utterly out of place. Racing further down the corridor, he finds that the staff and guests have all collapsed, littering the floor like discarded dolls. The peaceful facade of their karaoke outing has been shattered by an encroaching evil that has reached into their everyday lives. The young man flails his arms in a frantic panic, demanding to know what they should do in such a crisis. While he is losing his composure, Ryuga remains eerily calm, admitting that he had anticipated such an event would eventually occur. He continues to spiral, his face contorted with anxiety as he suggests calling the police. He struggles with his own identity in this crisis, feeling unprepared for a role that involves combat rather than the simple rhythms of daily life he is used to. His companion attempts to ground him, explaining that the unconscious people are victims of powerful hypnowaves. Ryuga insists that the only way to save them is to find and stop the source of the mental interference immediately. They are joined by Elmira, who observes the fallen crowd with a detached curiosity. It becomes clear that her supernatural nature as a vampire has granted her immunity to the waves that incapacitated the humans. She questions if they have identified the culprit, and Ryuga reveals that the manager is behind the attack. He had already investigated the front desk and confirmed his suspicions about the source of the hypnowaves. As Rei and Shiroi arrive, the group's focus shifts to the roof, where the manager has fled. Ryuga takes charge, instructing Hikaru to stay behind and look after the unconscious victims while the rest of the team pursues the enemy. Left alone in the quiet hallway, he strikes a confident pose, accepting his assigned task with a smirk. He had expected Ryuga to rely on him for this support role, and he watches as his friends race toward the coming battle. He watched as the others rushed toward the danger, shouting for them to go ahead while he remained behind to tend to the fallen. In his mind, he accepted this duty. When a central figure is in the heat of battle, someone must stay to care for the wounded, and he was perfectly suited for the task. Bending down, he began the arduous task of dragging the unconscious victims to safety, noting that such heavy lifting was quite a demand for an ordinary student. He mused that while it was a high-order task for a regular high schooler, it was exactly what was expected of a dedicated supporting character. Once the hallways were finally cleared, he took a moment to catch his breath, satisfied that he had fulfilled his duty. He reaffirmed his commitment to this path, vowing that if the protagonist ever needed anything, he would pour his entire being into supporting them. Relieved that the casualties among the guests and staff were minimal, he found himself with nothing left to do but return to the empty karaoke booth. In the silence of the room, he decided to pass the time by singing alone, a solitary figure amidst the lingering tension of the building. His solitary performance was interrupted during his third rendition of a holiday classic when Ryuga finally reappeared, looking weary from the confrontation on the roof. When questioned about the delay, Ryuga claimed to have been checking the other floors, but something about his demeanor felt fundamentally altered, sparking a sense of unease. As they spoke, a startling realization dawned on him regarding the true nature of Ryuga's exhaustion. Elmira had apparently feasted on their friend's blood. She thanked him profusely for the meal, declaring that his blood possessed a flavor far superior to anything she had ever tasted. The vampire seemed entirely intoxicated by the experience, her expression one of pure bliss as she compared the taste to the sweetest of wines. He could only watch in disbelief, internally labeling her a dumpire for her lack of restraint and the sheer absurdity of the situation. The aftermath of the incident lingered even back at school, where both Ryuga and Elmira appeared visibly drained and unwell. He noted a shift in his own mentality as well. The events at the karaoke bar had left him more determined than ever to refine his role as the perfect observer. Their teacher granted the request to visit the infirmary without much hesitation, acknowledging their poor condition. As they prepared to leave, he realized that this was the perfect opportunity to slip away unnoticed and continue his self-appointed mission. Seeing an opportunity to further his own role, he followed suit, excusing himself to maintain his position as the ever-present and observant friend. He was committed to perfecting his ways, ensuring he was always exactly where a supporting character needed to be. He feigns a heavy cough, clutching his chest to sell the performance of a student suddenly struck by illness. While his classmates might see a boy in need of the nurse's office, his mind is elsewhere, calculating the necessity of monitoring the battles that lie ahead for the group. As the group departs, their silhouettes shrinking in the distance, he watches them with a clinical detachment. To him, information is the ultimate shield. The more he understands their world, the better he can navigate the periphery without being swallowed by the chaos of their destined conflict. Following at a safe distance, he considers the tactical advantages of his observations. If he can identify the nature of their adversaries, he can subtly guide them through casual conversation, offering just enough insight to ensure their victory without revealing his own hand. He peers cautiously around a concrete pillar, his eyes narrowed in concentration. Efficiency is his mantra, and every scrap of data he gathers on the main characters allows him to play his supporting role with surgical precision. This habit of clandestine observation has become a routine, leading him to witness the terrifying reality of their struggle against shadowy, multi-eyed abominations. While the hero clashes with the darkness, he remains in the shadows, a silent witness to the escalating danger that has already claimed several of his knights. Among the trio of heroines, the gentle healer stands out for her vital role in their survival. Her presence on the battlefield is one of restoration, mending the wounds of her allies and weaving magic that slows the advance of their enemies. In contrast to the support, the disciplined guardian is a whirlwind of pure offensive power. Her mastery of the blade allows her to manipulate the very air, creating vacuum pockets that slice through anything in her path, placing her combat prowess just a step behind the hero himself. Then there is the vampire princess, a volatile force who serves as the group's secondary damage dealer. Her supernatural heritage grants her the gruesome ability to transmute blood into searing flames, striking down foes from a distance with a haughty, regal confidence. Despite their incredible powers, he notes with a sigh that the primary heroine seems cursed with a peculiar brand of misfortune. Even in the heat of their journey, she finds herself in compromising, almost theatrical predicaments that seem to follow the predictable tropes of a grand adventure. Ultimately, the hero remains the most versatile of them all, capable of replicating the feats of his companions with ease. Whether it is the vacuum strikes of the swordswoman or the healing arts of the support, he wields a fraction of his true dragon god power with a terrifying efficiency that leaves his enemies with little hope. The hero's overwhelming presence lingers in his mind as he sits back, reflecting on the recent encounter. He finds himself slightly disappointed, wishing he could have seen more of the monstrous threat, or perhaps more of the light-hearted moments that usually follow such battles. As he ponders, the true nature of their foes becomes clear. They are the apostles of Gehenna, entities hailing from a parallel dimension. He recognizes that there is a conceptual power behind these enemies that goes beyond simple physical threats. He discovers that these beings first crossed into this realm centuries ago when the gates between worlds were torn open, beginning a long conquest. He learns that they possess the unsettling ability to change their forms, blending into human society undetected. They are the focus of his notes as he records how the ancient war ended in the apostles' defeat and the sealing of the gate. He observes that a local spatial distortion has triggered their resurgence, and they are now desperately trying to awaken their king, who remains in a deep slumber within this world. He watches as the weight of this destiny presses down on the young hero, who stands surrounded by her loyal companions, realizing that this devil is the ultimate adversary in their shared story. She understands that if the predicted sequence of events holds true, the resurrection of this entity near the end of their journey would mean the total annihilation of the city, the school, and even his own home. It is a script of absolute destruction that leaves nothing standing. This dire prospect brings a more personal fear to his mind, as he imagines his father weeping over unpaid loans. He realizes with a start that if his home is destroyed, he would be the one forced to shoulder the ever-increasing debt his father hasn't even begun to pay back. Despite these domestic worries, the group remains steadfast, deciding that the hero's path must take precedence over all else. He watches as they prioritize her mission, even as he silently urges his father to endure the financial hardship a little longer. She carries a burden far older than these recent attacks, as the dragon god is a guardian deity passed down through the Hinamori bloodline. He notes that she has been considered special since birth, and it was only when she inherited this power that the apostles began their renewed assault, marking her as a unique existence even among her own clan. While she prepares for the coming storm, he finally snaps his notebook shut, satisfied with the depth of his investigation. He decides that he has gathered enough information for now and resolves to put his effort back into maintaining his facade as the unremarkable, slightly eccentric friend character. He sits quietly on a spring-mounted panda in the park, watching the group of warriors depart. He reasons that since they are professional fighters, his presence would eventually be detected, so he decides it is time to retreat to the safety of his home. As he prepares to leave, a sudden realization strikes the white-haired hero. Ryuga stops in their tracks, eyes widening in recognition as they spot the unassuming figure in the background. Seeing that he has been spotted, the young man offers a hesitant, awkward wave and a quiet greeting. The hero stands frozen, staring back in stunned silence, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. Internally, he is screaming, his face contorting in a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. He realizes with a jolt of horror that by acknowledging the hero, he has made a catastrophic error that threatens his carefully maintained anonymity. His panic only intensifies as the hero seems more flustered than suspicious, a faint blush creeping onto their cheeks as they stammer out his name. The unexpected encounter has clearly left them off balance. Beside them, the three companions watch the exchange with varying degrees of bewilderment. He feels the foundation of his ordinary friend persona literally crumbling away, the sounds of his social camouflage shattering echoing in his mind as his secret life as a background character is jeopardized. The school day begins with Ikaru offering a casual morning greeting to Ryuga. She appears somewhat distant and pensive, her arms crossed as she leans against the wall, seemingly lost in thought amidst the morning bustle. Nearby, Elmira is completely slumped over her desk, fast asleep. Ikaru observes her, wondering if her nocturnal nature as a vampire is the cause of her daytime exhaustion, or if it is simply a part of her character's established setting. Observing her, he reflects on how his perspective has shifted since learning the truth about his friends. While he jokes about Elmira's vampire traits, he acknowledges that she might simply suffer from low blood pressure, a mundane explanation for her constant lethargy. His mind wanders back to the chaotic events of the previous day when Ryuga's secrets were laid bare. He realizes that while Ryuga tried to keep him in the dark, he already knew most of the truth. Now, he decides to pivot his role, acting as the oblivious, supportive friend to help maintain a sense of normalcy in their everyday lives. Later, he checks in with Ryuga regarding their ongoing supernatural battles, specifically asking about any dangerous apostles. Ryuga explains that while the enemies are growing more powerful, they are currently on a losing streak, allowing Ikaru to offer some lighthearted encouragement from his new position as a supporting character. He mentions that a particular threat, a thief who stole the souls of women, was dealt with a few days prior. This news brings a visible sense of relief to Ryuga, who exhales softly, glad that the immediate danger has passed and that the situation was handled quietly. The conversation turns to the tactics used during that encounter, specifically how Shirori and Rei had volunteered to act as decoys. The memory of their indignant reactions to the plan brings a small smile to the situation, highlighting the group's unique dynamic. Ryuga suddenly turns the tables, teasingly accusing him of flirting with the girls while they were busy fighting. He quickly denies the charge, though internally he feels a sense of liberation. He no longer has to be a mere observer of their dangerous trials and can instead get the information directly from the hero. She lets out a soft, genuine laugh, her expression brightening significantly. When he asks what she finds so amusing, she simply admits that she feels a profound sense of happiness in that moment, enjoying the simple normalcy of their interaction. She confesses that she had been worried that revealing her secret would create a rift between them, but is relieved to see he hasn't changed at all. He responds with a determined grin and a thumbs up, reaffirming that they are buddies no matter what, and that he will always be by her side. He listens intently as the weight of their bond is reaffirmed, the word buddies hanging in the air as a promise of unwavering support. Because of this commitment, he chooses his next words with extreme care when the question of hidden secrets arises. He can see the visible strain on his friend, a heavy burden that seems to pulse with a physical rhythm, yet he remains patient. With a reassuring smile, he declares that no secrets will be forced into the light, privately vowing to maintain his position as the dependable friend and not let himself be overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation. He offers a final bit of comfort, telling his companion that the truth can wait until the moment feels right. This unexpected kindness leaves the other youth flustered and stammering out a word of thanks, though he can't help but notice a strange, distant look in his friend's eyes. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts violently as a familiar, agonizing frenzy takes hold, causing a collapse that sends him rushing forward in a panic. He shouts for the internal dragon to settle, desperate to protect his friend from the invisible assault. Once the episode subsides, he remains by the side of the exhausted youth, noting with a touch of irony that in this moment of vulnerability, no legendary heroine has appeared to offer comfort. Moments later, as they recover, he watches with a weary expression, perhaps questioning the absurdity of their situation even as the immediate danger passes. To break the lingering tension, he playfully threatens to scribble on his friend's face, a bit of mundane mischief to ground them back in their everyday reality. A few days pass, and he is back to his usual antics, charging forward with a phone in hand and shouting about trivial updates to measurements, much to the visible annoyance of his companion, who has finally had enough of the nonsense. He seems to be slipping away, his back turned as he delivers the news that they cannot walk home together today. Ikaru watches him go, a sense of unease settling in his gut as he realizes this is becoming a pattern. As he strides down the corridor, a mysterious envelope marked confidential rests nearby, hinting at the secret business pulling him away. He reiterates that Ikaru must head home alone, leaving his friend standing in the middle of the hallway. This distance gnaws at Ikaru, who begins to spiral into a state of nervous perspiration. He frantically searches his memory, wondering if some unintended slight has created a rift between them, or if he is simply being replaced. The possibility that his friend has finally found a true heroine to spend time with flashes through his mind, a scenario that would leave him completely sidelined. He imagines a shadowy figure encroaching on their bond, a thought that sends a jolt of alarm through him. His mind, ever attuned to the tropes of their world, completes a mental profile of this potential rival, a new friend character. He fears the arrival of someone who might possess supernatural perversions, like the ability to see through clothing, which would surely disrupt the balance of their lives. He envisions this newcomer as a calculating strategist, perhaps someone with a technological edge or a personality that outshines his own. The fear of someone funnier or more considerate taking his place feels like a matter of life and death for his identity as the supporting character. Unable to bear the uncertainty, he bolts down the hallway, his footsteps echoing as he calls out his friend's name. He is driven by a desperate need to ensure that no other pervert enters the fray, convinced that his own unique brand of friendship is all the world can handle. He catches up and clings to his friend's arm, tears streaming down his face as he blubbers questions about girlfriends or superior new companions. In response, the other looks down with a gentle, almost affectionate gaze, softly reassuring him that no one could ever be a better friend than he is. This declaration brings a flood of relief, and he weeps openly, his heart swelling with the knowledge that his position is secure. He is so overcome with gratitude that he barely notices the other's struggle to be released from his tight, emotional grip. As they finally head toward the exit, he decides to stop prying into the secrets of the afternoon, content for now with their restored status quo. However, as they walk, his companion remains silent, harboring a hidden truth that has yet to be revealed. They had kept a secret, one that even the heroines were not privy to. Ikaru realized that as a mere supporting figure in this grand narrative, it would be improper to pry or learn the truth before those closer to the center of the storm. He resolved to stay within his bounds, content to remain in the periphery of the hero's life. Despite his resolution, the hero's absence became impossible to ignore when the second period began and their seat remained empty. Ryuga had vanished without a word, leaving the classroom feeling strangely hollow. He scanned the room, noting that the usual circle of companions, the stoic guardian, the gentle support, and the haughty princess, were all present, yet none were with their leader. It seemed this was a solitary journey, a special chapter unfolding away from the prying eyes of the main cast. Retreating to the quiet of a bathroom stall, he couldn't help but speculate on the nature of this sudden disappearance. The thought struck him, perhaps a new player was entering the stage at this very moment, meeting the hero in secret. He felt a jolt of nervous energy at the thought of a new heroine appearing. It was a daunting prospect, wondering if he should be bracing himself for another dramatic introduction that would further complicate their already chaotic lives. He considered the rhythm of their world, knowing that when the conflict begins to feel stagnant, a new fighter is often introduced to revitalize the struggle. It was a common pattern, one he had seen play out many times before. While washing his hands, he mentally cataloged the current roster: a shrine maiden, a master of the blade, and a vampire princess. He pondered what archetype could possibly be next, perhaps an underclassman. As the self-appointed friend of the protagonist, he felt a duty to prepare himself for whatever new personality might soon join their ranks. Leaning against the cool tile of the wall, he entertained the idea that this might not be a new person at all, but rather a trial to grant the dragon god a new level of power. Regardless of the outcome, he knew that as an official confidant, he would inevitably be drawn into the orbit of whatever new force was about to emerge. He felt the sting of being left behind weighing heavily on his heart, as the sensation of being ignored by his closest friend was a bitter pill to swallow. Deciding that planning for the future was far more critical than sitting through another lecture, he slipped away before the third period could begin, seeking a quiet refuge to gather his thoughts. He eventually found himself at the door of the infirmary, finding it blessedly empty of both patients and the school nurse. It was the perfect sanctuary, a place where he could finally think without the constant pressure of the world's expectations, wishing others like Minazashi could learn to be just as relaxed. He enters the quiet infirmary, noting that one of the beds is already occupied. Assuming it's just another student skipping class, he decides to take the other bed for himself to rest in peace. Moving quietly to avoid disturbing the sleeper, he begins to sneak past the drawn curtain. A soft rustling sound from behind the fabric catches his attention, making him pause in his tracks. The sound intensifies as the figure beneath the sheets shifts, the fabric stretching over a distinctly feminine form that seems to be tossing and turning in sleep. He stares at the curtain, a sudden realization dawning on him. Despite his usual lack of interest in such matters, the sheer proximity of the situation leaves him momentarily paralyzed with curiosity. He settles onto a nearby chair, his mind racing through the roles he usually plays. While he often maintains a list of attractive girls as part of his pervy friend persona, his true interests usually lie in history and academic profiles rather than real-world romance. Kneeling on the chair, he offers a silent, mock prayer to the heavens for the sight he is about to witness. He justifies his curiosity as the natural reaction of a healthy teenager, convincing himself that no one could truly fault him for taking a peek. He slowly parts the curtain, leaning in to catch a glimpse of the lucky pervert scenario that usually only happens to protagonists in the stories he knows so well. The sight before him is breathtaking. A girl lies there in deep sleep, her breathing steady and her form partially revealed by the disarrayed blankets. His heart hammers against his ribs, a physical reaction he can't quite suppress as he takes in the scene. He briefly considers the other girls in his social circle, Rei, Shirori, and Elmira, and wonders why he feels so drawn to this particular person. Since this individual isn't one of the official heroine candidates in his mental narrative, he feels a strange sense of permission to keep watching, even as he prepares to retreat. Suddenly, the sleeper stirs and opens her eyes, revealing herself to be none other than Ryuga. The shock of seeing his friend in such a vulnerable and feminine state leaves him completely speechless, his mind reeling from the unexpected revelation. Shirori halts in the school corridor, her expression shifting to one of mild surprise as she recognizes a familiar face. She calls out to the boy, clearly not expecting to run into him in this part of the building. He approaches her with an unusually intense and wide-eyed stare, his focus entirely on the task at hand. He admits that he, too, is currently searching for their mutual friend, Ryuga. Because they are both on the same trail, she confesses that she had assumed the two of them would be together, given how often they are seen in each other's company. Their conversation is suddenly joined by the tall guardian, who appears uncharacteristically flustered, her hands instinctively clutching at her chest, as if she feels exposed. She asks if they're also looking for the young hero, wondering aloud where he could have possibly disappeared to. A long, weary yawn breaks the tension as the vampire princess rouses herself from her desk, finally offering the information they've been seeking. She explains that Ryuga had returned briefly just before the fourth period to gather his things before leaving the school entirely. When questioned about why she didn't notice more details despite being in the same classroom, she simply blinks with half-lidded eyes. She states bluntly that she had been asleep the entire time, oblivious to anything beyond her own rest. This revelation causes the guardian to sink into thought, recalling how the hero has been acting strangely of late. She notes that he has been frequently spacing out, his mind clearly occupied by something heavy and unspoken. The gentle girl nods, her own worries mirrored in her soft features as she observes that Ryuga seems to be trying to shoulder everything alone. She wonders why he feels the need to isolate himself instead of asking for their help. As the three young women stand together, a somber mood settles over the group. They realize that while he likely kept silent to avoid causing them distress, his absence has only made them more anxious. They remain there, united by their shared concern for the boy who has left them behind. Watching this rare gathering of the heroines from the periphery, the observer realizes the significance of the moment. He concludes that his primary role now is to find Ryuga and relay just how deeply these women are worried about him. He stood there, sweat beading on his brow as he realized the others were completely in the dark. While they fretted over Ryuga's absence, the memory of what he had witnessed in the infirmary burned in his mind, a secret he wasn't yet ready to share. Moments later, he stumbled upon the very person he was thinking about, but the sight was beyond belief. Ryuga stood before him, but the masculine hero he knew had been replaced by a girl with a strikingly feminine figure. As he stared in disbelief, she became increasingly agitated, her face flushing as she realized he was seeing her in this compromised state. The silence was shattered by a piercing scream as she desperately tried to shield herself from his gaze. She wailed for him to stop looking, insisting that things weren't what they seemed and frantically claiming she was supposed to be as flat as a board, despite the obvious evidence to the contrary. Despite her protests, the physical transformation was undeniable, leaving him completely flustered and unable to look away. She continued to shout, asserting her identity as a man while her own body betrayed her words, eventually calling him a big dummy for his stunned silence. The sheer absurdity of the situation hit him like a physical blow, leaving his mind reeling. He struggled to process the chaos, his wide eyes reflecting a deep sense of confusion. This wasn't a scenario he had ever prepared for, and he found himself unable to categorize the bizarre event unfolding before him. As he tried to make sense of it, his thoughts drifted to the typical tropes of a hero's life, wondering how a harem protagonist could suddenly possess such a feminine form. He felt utterly lost, questioning his own role in a story that had suddenly taken such a sharp, inexplicable turn. A wild theory began to take root in his mind. Could there actually be two of them? He entertained the possibility of a hidden twin, or perhaps one of those strange occurrences where a character's female half suddenly manifests, trying to find any logical explanation for the two distinct versions of Ryuga he had now seen. She seemed to be caught in the throes of a supernatural phenomenon, her body radiating an intense energy. He wondered if this was the work of the dragon god, or perhaps a dark curse that granted immense power at the cost of one's physical identity. Finally, he began to distance himself from the immediate shock, though his mind remained a whirlwind of questions. He walked away slowly, pondering if there was a third, even more far-fetched possibility that he hadn't yet considered. He begins to piece together a logical explanation for the transformation, theorizing that an apostle of Gehenna might possess the power to alter a body's gender. It seems like the most plausible scenario in this chaotic narrative, fitting the tropes of an enemy's interference. His mind wanders to the potential consequences, imagining how a more lecherous companion might react to Ryuga's new form. He realizes he has a firm grasp on the situation, but a new dilemma arises. Should he share this revelation with the other heroines, or keep the secret to himself for the sake of group harmony? While lost in these calculations, his gaze drifts toward Yukimiya, who stands nearby, completely unaware of the internal storm brewing within him. He can't help but draw silent, analytical comparisons between her and the transformed Ryuga. He is struck by a dark realization as he considers the delicate balance of the group's dynamics. If Yukimiya were to discover that Ryuga's new physical attributes surpassed her own, the shock might be enough to drive her toward a path of darkness, a catastrophic shift in her character that he is desperate to avoid. She interrupts his spiraling thoughts with a bright, cheerful suggestion, completely oblivious to the weight of the secret he carries. He quickly decides that for the sake of everyone's sanity and the stability of their roles, he will remain silent about Ryuga's true condition. The young woman continues with her plan, proposing that they prepare a meal to lift Ryuga's spirits and encourage him to open up about whatever is bothering him. She believes that sharing a meal will help them all share in his burdens and strengthen their bond. He watches her with a sense of admiration, noting how her selfless and caring nature cements her status as a premier heroine. In his eyes, her heart and dedication far outweigh any physical comparisons he might have been making moments before. However, the atmosphere shifts abruptly as Ray and Elmira approach, their expressions clouded and their auras radiating a strange, unsettling energy. He can't help but feel a chill as he notices their unusually dark and intense demeanors. She remains unfazed by the tension, turning to Ray and asking for confirmation on whether she would like to join in the cooking effort. Ray's reaction is intense, her eyes wide and her face shadowed, as if the very idea of domesticity is a monumental challenge she must conquer. Despite the ominous vibes coming from the others, Shirori remains enthusiastic about the group activity, taking the lead on the plan. Meanwhile, the dark expressions on Ray and Elmira's faces suggest that this culinary endeavor might lead them all toward a disastrous end rather than a peaceful meal. He watches as the two powerful women descend into a state of pure dread. Elmira pleads with Ray not to force the task upon her, claiming that even her vampiric resistance to toxins has its limits against the potential lethality of their own culinary creations. The vampire princess recalls a grim precedent, remembering how her butler, Sebastian, was rendered unconscious immediately after sampling her cooking during their last attempt. Amidst this growing panic, Shirori offers a glimmer of hope, mentioning her recent lessons in preparing beef stroganoff, though Ikaru privately notes that even the most perfect heroine seems to possess a glaring flaw in the kitchen. He finds a dark amusement in the situation, teasing Ryuga for being the center of such chaotic attention while he intends to remain a safe, distant observer of the impending disaster. As the group lingers in the classroom, the weight of the upcoming task hangs heavy in the air, with the two warriors still visibly shaken by the prospect of handling a spatula. Suddenly, the focus shifts as Elmira proposes a new plan. Ikaru should serve as the primary taste tester to gauge the safety of the food before anyone else partakes. Rei quickly agrees, masking her desperation by suggesting his sacrifice is actually a helpful contribution to the group's efforts. He is struck by a sudden, cold realization that his role as the protagonist's friend has backfired, leaving him vulnerable to this punishment game, now that the usual hero is nowhere to be found. The pressure intensifies as Rei appeals to his sense of chivalry, and Elmira begs for his cooperation, their faces etched with a frantic need to avoid their own cooking. Despite his protests of being a mere ordinary student, Elmira counters that his proximity to the hero makes him the perfect candidate for this dangerous duty, leaving him screaming in silent protest. While Shirori remains blissfully enthusiastic about her beef stroganoff, the overwhelming dread of the poison he is expected to consume gives him a literal headache, forcing him to contemplate a hasty retreat from the looming culinary catastrophe. He sits at his desk, brooding over the empty seat where his friend should be. It has been 3 days since Ryuga last attended school, and while the others believe a simple cold is to blame, Elmira's boisterous laughter and mockery of human frailty only serve to heighten his irritation. He wishes she would at least attempt to maintain a shred of her secret identity instead of gloating about puny humans losing to a virus. Looking out at the cityscape, he knows the truth is far more complicated than a viral infection. The real reason for the absence weighs heavily on his mind, a secret shared only between him and the hero who has suddenly vanished from the classroom. As he crosses the street, his thoughts race with possibilities. He wonders if the transformation into a girl is starting to affect Ryuga's psyche, or if the hero is simply taking time off because of the sheer shock of being seen in such a state by his closest observer. He recalls the image of Ryuga reacting with a high-pitched, feminine shriek, a sound no legendary foe had ever managed to elicit. It seems this scary apostle of gender bending is the only enemy capable of truly cornering the dragon god to such an embarrassing degree. Continuing his walk, he ponders the best course of action. Perhaps it would be better to avoid school entirely until the situation stabilizes, or at the very least, wait for Ryuga to be the one to initiate contact and break the silence. A sudden realization brings a small smirk to his face as he checks his phone. By staying away from the main group and the hero's side, he can successfully dodge the lethal poison-tasting sessions the heroines have planned for their upcoming cooking project. His phone vibrates with a new notification, shattering his brief moment of relief. It is a direct message from Ryuga, asking with uncharacteristic directness if he is free to talk about something important. He responds by inviting the hero to his own home. Since he lives alone, it provides the perfect sanctuary for a private conversation where they can speak freely without the risk of being overheard by the meddling heroines. The sun begins to set over his residence, casting long, ominous shadows across the neighborhood. In hindsight, he realizes that his casual response was a grave mistake, though at the time, he remained blissfully unaware of the heavy atmosphere that was about to descend. Inside the quiet apartment, he finds himself sitting across from a demure and feminine Ryuga. The silence is thick with awkwardness as he notices that while the physical changes seem to have subsided, the hero's posture and serious expression suggest that the incident has left a deep, unresolved mark. She hesitates for a moment, her gaze dropping as she prepares to speak. Ikaru waits in the heavy silence of the room, sensing the weight of the words about to be shared. The secret she carries is one she believes he has already deduced, the truth of how an apostle's power transformed her into this female form. She looks at him with a mixture of vulnerability and expectation, wondering if he truly understands the depth of her situation. With the truth finally out in the open, she feels a sense of relief, noting that there is nothing left to hide between them. Ikaru simply nods, acknowledging the gravity of her confession as the clock on the wall ticks away the seconds. Sitting across from him at the low table, she makes a sudden and unexpected request, asking for his assistance with a specific kind of training. The atmosphere in the small apartment shifts from somber to intensely focused. This catches Ikaru off guard, but he quickly rationalizes it as a standard development where the psychic supports the hero's growth. He assumes they will be practicing combat or honing supernatural abilities. He feels his pulse quicken, unsure why his heart is racing so intensely, yet he resolves to play his part as the reliable friend during this supposed power-up arc. He tries to maintain a cool exterior, convincing himself that this is just another part of their journey. She continues, her expression softening as she explains her desire to live as a normal girl would, preparing for a future where she might never return to her original self. She emphasizes that Ikaru is the only one she can truly rely on for this task. With a sudden burst of energy and a deep blush, she declares her true intention. She wants to undergo romance training with him. The revelation leaves Ikaru completely stunned, his mind racing as he realizes he had been ignoring a very different possibility all along. The shock of her words echoes through the room, shattering Ikaru's preconceived notions about their relationship and the nature of her transformation. He finally admits to himself what he had been trying to ignore. Ryuga was a girl from the very beginning. As she sits before him, Visibly embarrassed by her own outburst, Ikaru comes to a startling realization. The comfortable role he had built for himself as the protagonist's mere friend has come to an end for good. Tomo strikes a playful pose in a nurse's uniform, calling out to Ikaru to look at her. She seems to be enjoying the roleplay immensely, radiating a high-energy charm that catches everyone off guard. Ryuji finds himself at home, reflecting on the current situation. He is helping her play the role of lovers as part of her training, a task that feels increasingly surreal given they are alone at his house. He watches her, noting how much she has changed since revealing her true identity as a girl. She claims to have caught a cold, but the nurse outfit she's wearing for this training only adds to his growing unease and confusion. She suddenly leans in, pressing her forehead against his to check for a fever. The proximity leaves him paralyzed, wondering what he is even doing as she jokingly suggests he needs surgery for his perpetually tired-looking eyes. This strange dynamic is a departure from his usual life. Previously, he spent his time as the supporting friend to Ryuga, but since he was denied that role, he and Tomo have found themselves spending nearly all their after-school hours together. She recalls their various outings, viewing the time they spent together not just as training, but as actual dates. Her expression is soft and sincere, a stark contrast to the energetic persona she usually projects. Returning to the present, she offers to take him to a fancy cafe or a romance movie if he wants to go. He lies there, overwhelmed by the realization that her previous scary behavior might have actually been her attempt at showing a maiden's heart. She then presents a bowl of rice and oysters, claiming it's a nurse's specialty prepared specifically for her patient. He looks at the dish with a mix of hunger and hesitation as she prepares to feed him by hand. He takes a bite and is surprised to find it genuinely delicious. He can't help but compare it to Ryuga's cooking, noting that while Ryuga is a master in the kitchen, her efforts have a unique and comforting charm. As she continues to feed him, he finds it difficult to focus on the meal. Her proximity and the sudden emergence of her long-repressed femininity are almost too much for him to handle in such a quiet setting. He watches as Tomo happily devours her meal, her appetite as robust as ever. Nearby, Ikaru observes the scene with a mix of confusion and hunger, questioning why she is gulping down the food so quickly. He can only watch as she begins to tease him about the notes he's taking, suggesting he's merely collecting data on her physique like he does with other girls. He quickly denies this, insisting his observations are for her benefit, though she admits that concealing her figure with a seressure has been quite a painful endeavor. This revelation highlights the stark contrast between her usual appearance in a school uniform and her current form. The restrictive binding she normally wears creates a completely different silhouette than the one now visible in her nurse's attire. She leans in, asking if the sudden change in her size is bothersome to him. He becomes visibly flustered, his face flushing as he marvels at the effectiveness of the seressure, calling it a magic item for its ability to hide such a significant part of her. Meanwhile, Hyuka and Ikaru discuss the logistics of such garments, with Hyuka noting that girls who use sarashis are impressive enough on their own. Ikaru, however, seems overwhelmed by the conversation, his expression twisting into one of pure discomfort. He remains silent as the dark-haired boy turns to him and pleads for him to stop trying to gather more girl data, hoping to put an end to the awkward scrutiny. He is caught off guard when she closes the distance between them, whispering a provocative offer into his ear. She will reveal her 3 sizes if he tells her more about the magic behind her chest disappearing act. He can only sit there, paralyzed and blushing, as she playfully grips the fabric of her skirt. The intensity of their physical intimacy doesn't go unnoticed, as it's clear that when they are alone, she tends to go all out with her affection, catching him off guard with her boldness. This behavior is a far cry from her past, where she often asked him for head pats or to be carried like a princess, perhaps as a reaction to the years she spent being raised and living as a boy. He reflects on the strange circumstances of her upbringing. As the successor of the Hinamori family, she was raised as a male because the dragon god is said to reside only in men, leading her to purposely overcompensate with feminine clothing like miniskirts now that she is embracing her true self. She beams with infectious energy, rattling off a list of potential personas: an armored warrior, a football player, eager to know which transformation he desires to witness next. Before he can even process the options, she delivers a sharp, playful chop to the top of his head, eliciting a sharp cry of pain as he clutches the impact site. He winces, the physical sting fading into a deeper mental ache as he contemplates the precarious nature of their pretend lovers arrangement, fearing that the boundary between performance and reality is beginning to dissolve. This internal conflict mirrors a universal truth. When people play at being heroes or rivals, the friction of their proximity often sparks genuine, unscripted clashes that transcend the original game. Sitting amidst the quiet of the room, he realizes that even if she were to fully embrace a feminine role, the inherent, magnetic charm of a true protagonist like Ryuga would remain an insurmountable force. She leans in close, now clad in a simple gym uniform, her proximity causing his heart to race and his face to flush a deep crimson as he desperately tries to purge every worldly, impure thought from his mind. Moments later, she has transitioned into a nurse's attire, hovering over him with a mischievous glint in her eyes as she offers a soothing apology to mend his supposed injuries, driving his internal panic to a fever pitch. Desperate to reset their dynamic, she adopts a ridiculous leopard pose while wearing a sailor uniform, hoping that such a display of forced lewdness will finally cause him to recoil in disgust and return them to the safety of friendship. Instead of the expected revulsion, the sight of her arched back and the short skirt of the uniform triggers a bizarre, primal shift in him, his composure shattering into a state of frantic, unsettling obsession. Even as she stands before him in a sleek school swimsuit, her confusion grows. Her plan to repel him has backfired spectacularly, leaving him begging for even more outrageous displays of her newfound femininity. She continues her performance, striking a festive pose in a revealing red and white outfit while asking if this is the kind of display he wanted. Ryuji, far from being repulsed, is consumed by the task, frantically capturing every angle with his camera. He is no longer just a reluctant participant. He has become an enthusiast, his initial hesitation replaced by a fervent, almost predatory focus on the spectacle before him. As he focuses on the details of her costume, a sudden wave of self-awareness washes over him. He begins to question his own actions, wondering if his behavior has devolved into that of a mere voyeur in the eyes of those around them. This realization doesn't lead to shame, but rather a shift in his self-perception. He concludes that he has transcended the role of a simple friend to become a fully fledged, overexcited boyfriend. Meanwhile, Ikaru watches from the sidelines, his expression one of pure bewilderment as he witnesses the bizarre transformation of his companion's personality. Despite the growing absurdity, she leans further into her roleplay, speaking of mystical threats like the apostles of Gehenna and the unstoppable power of love. He plays along with unsettling intensity, his eyes wide and fixed on her, even as she privately frets over the presence of their audience and the strange turn their pretend relationship has taken. He realizes that the current trajectory is moving too far into the realm of romance and needs to be steered back toward the familiar territory of a battle-focused narrative. To do this, he decides to invoke the legend of the dragon god, hoping to shift her focus back to her supposed heroic duties. The legend speaks of a primal force, a power that dwells within a host and waits for any sign of weakness to seize control and go on a rampage. Suddenly, she lets out a strange, high-pitched cry that startles everyone present. Ikaru, sensing the shift in energy, asks with genuine concern if the legendary dragon god has finally lost control and gone berserk. Instead of a terrifying transformation, she begins acting with an exaggerated, saccharine cuteness that leaves Ikaru utterly speechless. He can only watch in silence as even the supposed spirit within her seems to succumb to this new, bewildering charm. Sensing that something is fundamentally wrong, the muscular youth approaches his friend to speak privately. He mentions a previous conversation at a karaoke bar, indicating he has a serious question that needs an honest answer. He is interrupted before he can finish, as she turns her attention toward them with a look of sharp curiosity. She demands to know what secrets they are keeping, her playful demeanor momentarily replaced by a piercing gaze. She presses him for answers, and he stammers in response, desperately trying to justify his recent behavior as a solemn promise to be the sharp-witted, reliable friend she truly needs. He continues his explanation by recalling the dramatic lines he fed her earlier, reminding her of his vow to remain silent for eternity and only reveal the truth once they were back in the safety of their classroom. She begins to connect the dots as she processes these memories, wondering if this mysterious and protective behavior was exactly what Ikaru had been trying to warn her about all along. She is left reeling as he suddenly dives deeper into his role, striking dramatic poses and declaring that he has always known her secrets while promising a future where they can finally be more than just friends. Her fantasies take a romantic turn because of this intense display, leading to a vivid daydream where they stand at the altar as bride and groom, discussing a honeymoon in France while he internally struggles to maintain the charade. She eventually transitions into a new roleplay scenario, arriving home in the guise of a spirited younger sister and greeting Kyuka with a cheerful shout as a set of interactive prompts appears to guide the next stage of their drama. Kyuka, Ryuji's younger sister, extends a warm invitation to Tomo for dinner. While she smiles brightly, Ryuji is gripped by a spiraling internal panic. He envisions a catastrophic sequence of events, a simple dinner leading to an overnight stay, followed by a late-night cosplay session, and ultimately ending in a situation that would surely mean his social or literal demise. He desperately tries to make his exit, claiming he already has food prepared at home to avoid further entanglement. Despite his sister's attempts to keep the guest longer, he insists on leaving, hoping to maintain some semblance of his normal life. Before he can fully escape, Tomo leans in with a playful wink, urging him to ensure his sister's happiness and complimenting her culinary skills. The sheer unexpectedness of her support leaves him standing there, mouth agape, in utter bewilderment. Finally making his getaway, he walks down the street as Tomo waves a cheerful goodbye from the distance. A heavy weight seems to lift from his shoulders as he leaves his family estate behind, though a lingering dread remains regarding whatever stories his sister might be sharing in his absence. As he trudges further away, the physical and mental toll of the day's events becomes visible in his slumped posture and weary expression. He reflects on the bizarre shift in his reality. While minor adjustments to his role as a friend were manageable, the prospect of becoming the protagonist's boyfriend feels like stepping into an entirely different, more dangerous dimension. His mind races through the names of those around him, Ryuga, Ikaru, and the others who inhabit the center of this narrative world. He questions his own worthiness, doubting whether someone like him can truly be trusted with the weight of a major role in the unfolding story. Continuing his solitary walk, he catches sight of a figure sitting alone on a bench near the park. His thoughts drift back to Tomo, questioning her motives for choosing him of all people to play the part of her fake boyfriend, cynically wondering if she simply has a penchant for the wrong kind of person. He realizes the person on the bench is Yukizaki, a girl he recognizes as a former candidate for a central role in the lives of those around him. Caught in a moment of indecision, he feels he cannot simply ignore her and cautiously approaches to see what has her so occupied. She is gently cradling a small cat in her lap, her hands glowing with a soft, restorative light. She explains calmly that the creature's hind leg was injured, and she is currently in the process of healing it, revealing a compassionate side to her nature. She accepts the praise with a humble smile as he commends her kindness toward the stray cat. She insists that providing support is the extent of her capabilities, a modest admission that catches his attention and makes him wonder about the true nature of her role. He watches her, his mind racing with the knowledge that she is Shirori Yukimiya, the shrine maiden of fortune blessed with ancestral healing powers. He can't help but wonder if her earlier self-deprecating remark about her poor cooking skills was a hint of a deeper insecurity regarding her identity. This mystical gift is a heavy burden, passed down through her family for generations to only a single girl in each cycle. She stands silently, the weight of her lineage visible in her contemplative gaze as the history of the maidens unfolds in his thoughts. It occurs to him that such inherited power is a common thread among those destined for greatness, much like the bloodlines that likely empower Ozaki and Elmira. These lineages seem to be the foundation upon which main characters are built, leaving those without them in the shadows. He finds himself caught between two possibilities. Are her troubles rooted in the expectations of her birthright, or the simple frustration of her culinary failures? The dilemma mirrors his own internal struggle to define his purpose as a mere supporting player in this unfolding story. Because her words about only being able to offer support strike a chord with his own experiences, he decides to probe further. He wonders if his own feelings of being a secondary character are shared by the girl standing before him, leading him to consider if she is troubled by something deeper. He speaks up, his voice filled with a sudden clarity as he asks if she feels burdened by her position as a support figure during the heat of battle. The question hangs in the air, cutting through her composure and forcing her to confront a truth she might have been hiding. She looks at him with wide, surprised eyes, caught off guard by how easily he saw through her facade. She admits that he is remarkably perceptive, her guard beginning to drop as she realizes he understands the specific weight of her role. He reasons that while a protagonist would typically be the one to shoulder a heroine's burdens, the current situation with Ryuga means she is no longer cast in that role. This shift allows him to step into the void, offering a listening ear that wouldn't normally be his to give in a standard narrative. She hesitates for a moment before preparing to speak, encouraged by his offer to listen. He tells himself that providing this kind of support is his duty as a professional side character, provided he maintains a safe distance from the center of the drama. She continues her confession, admitting that while she cannot match the raw offensive power of warriors like Rei or Elmira, she recognizes that even Ryuji operates on an entirely different plane of capability. As she gently strokes the fur of a stray cat, she explains that her ability to enhance her physical strength has its limits, leaving her unable to stand against the apostles without the others constantly stepping in to save her. He listens in silence, his mind drifting back to the terrifying moment an octopus-like apostle ensnared her, though he firmly believes her presence in those battles is far more vital than she realizes. Attempting to lift her spirits, he points out her unique ability to hinder the apostles' movements, but she remains despondent, convinced that she is nothing more than a burden to the team. In a desperate bid to break the tension, he suddenly strikes a ridiculous, heroic pose with a pair of sticks, leaving her momentarily stunned and questioning the sudden change in his behavior. He realizes the weight of her insecurity. With Ryuga's overwhelming power and his own self-healing abilities, her specialized role as a supporter must feel increasingly redundant to her. The absurdity of his own situation flashes through his mind, a chaotic gamble of social outcomes that makes him deeply empathize with her feeling of being adrift and purposeless. He speaks with renewed conviction, arguing that the reason the others can commit so fully to their attacks is precisely because they know she is there to watch their backs. He reminds her of a conversation with Ryuga, who admitted his own healing was selfish and limited, making her unique talents indispensable for the group's survival. His thoughts shift to Tomo, recalling how she once explained that while she has her own strengths, the intense focus required for healing leaves her dangerously vulnerable to enemy strikes, especially in her lower half. She continues her lecture with surprising intensity, crouching low as she insists that every person has a specific role they must fulfill. Beside her, the exhausted boy remains collapsed on the floor, his energy completely spent from the previous ordeal. Because she is so focused on her point, she leans in closer to her friend, explaining that her presence allows the others to fight without the constant fear of injury. She argues that healing isn't just a physical act, but a way to provide the team with essential peace of mind, urging the girl not to underestimate the importance of her support. Watching her friend's passionate display, Ryuji finally catches his breath and stands, offering a gentle smile to assure the healer that her value is recognized by those around her. He points out that she already has someone standing right there who fully acknowledges her worth. Despite his encouraging words, he privately questions his own motivations, wondering why he is becoming so deeply invested in the lives of those he considers minor players in this world. He notices her staring at him with a peculiar, intense expression, and he worries that his carefully maintained persona is slipping. While he watches a stray cat wander past them in the quiet hallway, he simply hopes that his meddling won't lead to further complications. As he stands there, Yukizaki suddenly bows deeply toward him, her eyes shining with a newfound sense of purpose. She admits that even the group's leader had never spoken to her with such clarity, and she thanks the pair for giving her the strength to continue her duties. She then leans in even closer, her voice dropping to a soft whisper as she mentions the impact of the words she just heard. The boy recoils slightly, his face flushing with sudden embarrassment at the unexpected proximity. She seems to be surrounded by an ethereal, sparkling aura as she declares that she sees the boy in an entirely different light. He looks around frantically, half expecting to find the source of the romantic music that suddenly seems to fill the air, wondering if he is experiencing some kind of optical illusion. She continues her praise, noting that she finally understands why Ryuji places so much trust in his companions. While she directs her gratitude toward the group, he feels the weight of the situation, internally screaming that the atmosphere has become far too intense and romantic for his liking. By the time she finishes, her expression is so full of angelic sincerity that it leaves him completely overwhelmed. He regrets his decision to offer even a shred of empathy, feeling that he has only succeeded in entangling himself further in their lives, and he eventually collapses from the sheer mental strain. He is pinned to the ground, gasping in shock at the sheer force of the girl's tackle. Yukizaki, hovering over him with a deep blush, pleads for him to keep her perceived weakness a secret between the two of them, her vulnerability on full display. As she remains close, she confesses that she feels a unique comfort with him, believing she can share anything without the usual social barriers. She admits that while she feared being a burden to others, she doesn't feel that weight when she is with him, leaving him sweating under the pressure of her sudden intimacy. The young woman's face glows with a soft radiance as she ponders the strange new feelings stirring within her. With a gentle smile and a hand to her cheek, she enthusiastically agrees that she would love to understand these emotions better. This emotional intensity is a heavy burden for him. However, as he writhes in mental agony, he realizes that while her newfound confidence might be a boon for their allies, the sheer weight of her expectations is rapidly eroding his own sanity. The prospect of maintaining separate, secret lives with both the group's hero and this devoted healer fills him with a sense of impending doom. He imagines himself caught in a never-ending cycle of clandestine meetings and exhausting social tightropes. His mind races through terrifying possibilities, imagining the wrath of his other companions should they discover this private arrangement. He envisions Ryuga's potential betrayal and Aozaki's sharp judgment, even briefly considering performing some absurd, lewd act just to break the romantic momentum and reset the emotional flag she has placed on it. Ultimately, he collapses into a heap of exhaustion, tears of frustration pricking his eyes. He resolves to suppress his more impulsive thoughts for the time being, lamenting his complicated role as a secondary figure in someone else's romantic narrative. Desperate for a return to normalcy, he begs her to simply forget the entire encounter ever happened. She rejects the idea instantly, her expression bright and determined as she officially designates him as her personal, exclusive advisor. The situation grows even more complex when Aozaki appears, dressed in an elegant, ruffled gown. She explains that her usual attendant is away and offers him a homemade meal as a token of her gratitude, further entangling him in the personal lives of his peers despite his visible hesitation. Amidst the growing chaos of his social life, a stray cat wanders into his path, offering a surreal moment of commentary. As he realizes he must find a way to be more assertive to handle these mounting pressures, the feline adds to the absurdity by warning him that it is not on the menu. He had no inkling at the time that his circumstances were about to deteriorate even further. Elsewhere, Kyuko paused as a sudden, sharp chill raced through her, prompting her to pull her dark robe closer over her delicate lace undergarments. She wondered if she was falling ill, but the feeling was something more ominous, a premonition of the complications to come that neither of them could have possibly foreseen. Ryuji starts his morning early, taking advantage of his parents' absence to handle the household chores himself. As he prepares to dry his futon under the clear sky, a sudden notification chime from his phone interrupts his routine. Upon checking the device, his eyes widen in pure, unadulterated terror, and a strangled cry escapes his throat. The source of his panic is a message from Yukimiya, stating simply and ominously that he had appeared in her dreams the previous night. He stares at the screen, cold sweat beading on his forehead as the weight of those words sinks in. Later, as he walks through the halls, he reflects on his current predicament, noting that he and Yukimiya are in different classes, which has allowed him to avoid her so far. However, this new, cryptic message threatens the fragile distance he has tried to maintain while he attempts to redefine his connection with Ryuga. He mentally cycles through various personas, the serious type, the cool type, wondering if shifting his demeanor might help him manage Yukimiya's unpredictable interest, though he laments that none of his previous efforts seem to have any effect. His internal monologue is cut short by another vibration from his phone, this time displaying Ryuga's name. He suddenly recalls the commitment he made to spend the weekend training with her, a promise that now feels like another complication in his already chaotic life. When he answers, however, it is Ikeru's voice on the other end, apologizing for the early hour. Ryuji listens intently, his expression weary as he processes the unexpected call. Elsewhere, Tomo sits in quiet contemplation, discussing the deep bond between Ryuga and her sister, Kyuka. She mentions that the planned cosplay fashion show at the Hinamori household has been abruptly canceled. The reason for the cancellation becomes clear as Kyuka lies in bed, her face flushed with a fever. Despite the disappointment of her new bunny girl costume going unused, Tomo reflects on how the sisters' unique upbringing has forged a connection so strong they have never even had a single fight. She is the primary concern as the phone call concludes, with a voice on the other end urging the young man to focus entirely on her recovery for the time being. He stands alone in his room, surrounded by the silence of a canceled weekend, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. He finds himself facing an entirely unexpected free day, a rare gap in his usually hectic schedule. A bead of sweat rolls down his temple as he stares blankly, the sudden lack of direction feeling more daunting than the plans themselves. The young man decides to board a train, heading toward the next town to clear his mind of the morning's stress. As the urban landscape flickers past the window, his thoughts drift toward Ryuga's intensity and the daunting prospect of spending the entire summer under such pressure, only to realize with a jolt that he left his phone behind in his haste to escape. He eventually seeks refuge in a quiet coffee shop, nursing a drink while his mind continues to churn. He reasons that Tomo is likely occupied with nursing duties, though he recalls the frustrating limitation of her healing powers. They are effective against physical trauma, but completely useless against a common fever. His imagination takes a bizarre and vivid turn, picturing Tomo in a provocative bunny girl outfit as she gallantly tends to a resting Ryuga. He finds himself strangely fixated on the details of the fantasy, even wondering about the texture of the costume's tail, while a faint, dazed smile creeps onto his face. This sudden realization of his own wandering thoughts causes him to recoil in horror, his face contorting as he questions his own sanity. He is left reeling, wondering what could have possibly possessed him to smile at such a ridiculous and inappropriate mental image. He begins to worry that he is subconsciously accepting a strange new role within their social circle, one that feels increasingly like being a side character in someone else's romance. The mental image of a bunny-clad Tomo being chased by a hunter-like Ryuga persists, fueling his growing sense of unease about the group's changing dynamics. A sudden movement at the adjacent table snaps him back to the present, causing him to nearly choke on his drink. He sits bolt upright, his heart hammering against his ribs as the mundane reality of the coffee shop rushes back to fill the void left by his daydreams. His attention is immediately seized by a striking woman walking through the shop, her long, dark hair and oversized sunglasses giving her the unmistakable aura of a celebrity. The other patrons break into hushed whispers, captivated by her poised demeanor and wondering if they are in the presence of a famous model or a high-profile socialite. The boy is struck by a bolt of pure shock when he recognizes the celebrity as Kyuka, despite her elaborate disguise and stylish new attire. When he calls out her name, she panics, frantically denying her identity and insisting she has no idea who he is, all while refusing to remove her sunglasses in a desperate attempt to maintain her cover. She sits across from him, her defensive posture softening as she admits she didn't recognize him at first in his casual clothes. She accuses him of laughing at her current appearance, but he quickly denies it, though he can't help but feel he's seeing a side of her usually reserved for private moments. Continuing her defensive rant, she lists her actual interests, fashion, accessories, and stuffed animals, to dispel the image of her as a stoic, archaic swordswoman who only practices in empty dojos. He can only sweat nervously as she calls out his internal assumptions, insisting that her love for Western music and cosmetics is just as real as her skill with a blade. He begins to wonder if he's made a terrible mistake by coming to this town, especially as she starts scanning the menu for shochu. The thought of her getting drunk and potentially swinging something around in a panic fills him with dread, though he finds a small mercy in the fact that she isn't currently carrying a sword. His eyes fixate on the simple plastic straw in his drink as a realization strikes him. The word rod echoes in his mind, triggering a new wave of concern about her instinctive combat reflexes. He gently reminds her that she is still a minor and that alcohol is strictly off limits, trying to steer her away from any reckless behavior. He points out that even without a blade, her reputation as a sword-wielding warrior precedes her, and he fears she might instinctively turn any long, thin object into a weapon. In a desperate attempt to change the subject and de-escalate her intensity, he suddenly points toward the window, claiming there's something remarkable in the sky. She turns her head, momentarily distracted by his blatant ruse. While her back is turned, he quickly tries to hide the potential weapon behind his back, hoping to remove any temptation. When she looks back, she is merely confused by his sudden shift in topic and his awkward, secretive posture. The tension breaks as she slips into a quiet, rambling state, her usual confidence replaced by a self-conscious mumble. He realizes that she has been trying so hard to maintain a specific image for everyone else that she suppressed her true self, a girl who actually enjoys following the latest trends and being a bit of a hipster. She fixes him with a sharp, knowing gaze, her eyes narrowing as she speaks. He feels a pang of guilt when she suggests that he is partly responsible for the rigid persona she feels forced to maintain. He reflects on how his own descriptions of her as a beautiful swordswoman have led to her being swarmed by female admirers, none of whom see the real girl beneath the title. He finally admits to himself that he played a significant role in crafting the very image she now finds so stifling. She sits across from Ryuji, her expression unreadable as he offers a sincere apology for his earlier intrusion. He admits his responsibility for the misunderstanding, but she quickly pivots the conversation, demanding to know why he was peeping in the first place. While she listens, he attempts to justify his actions by recalling a past event involving Ryuga and Tomo, one that they had shown no interest in despite its importance to him. The memory of his friend's indifference seems to fuel his current desperation to be understood by someone. As he continues to stammer through his explanation, pleading for her to understand how vital that moment was to him, she simply watches him with a piercing, analytical gaze. The intensity of her stare makes him break into a cold sweat, his words faltering under her silent scrutiny. Despite his pleas, she suddenly shifts her posture, her tone taking on a sharp, provocative edge as she questions if his true motive was a base desire to see her unclothed. She challenges him to admit if he finds any feminine charm in her at all, leaving him reeling from the sudden, aggressive change in direction. In response to her challenge, he frantically tries to clarify his intentions, insisting that his interest was purely in seeing her authentic self, not anything untoward. Sensing an opening, she asks for his honest opinion on her current choice of attire, catching him off guard once again with her sudden shift in mood. After hearing his explanation, she stands and presents her outfit, and to her surprise, he offers a detailed critique, praising her color palette and the placement of her accessories. His unexpected knowledge of fashion leaves her momentarily stunned, as he explains his reasoning with a level of confidence she hadn't expected. Following their exchange, the conversation flows effortlessly, and before they realize it, over an hour has passed in the quiet cafe. Over their fourth round of drinks, the initial tension dissolves into a shared, deep dive into the nuances of style and personal expression. As they talk, she finds herself genuinely impressed, noting down his insights in her notebook while admitting that no one has ever been able to keep up with her fashion sense until now. He, meanwhile, looks slightly drained by the intensity of the discussion, sipping his drink while processing the unexpected turn of events. While she writes, a sudden realization hits him that he might have dug his own grave by showing off his expertise. He tries to make a hasty exit, mentioning he needs to find Tomo, but his attempt to flee is immediately intercepted by her intense gaze. Before he can leave, she leans in, her eyes sparkling with a newfound purpose as she asks him to become her personal fashion coordinator. The request leaves him completely stunned and horrified, realizing that she is so desperate for someone to understand her true self that she's willing to bind him to her in this new, demanding role. He desperately tries to deflect her attention, suggesting that Ryuga would be a much better choice for a shopping companion. The thought of the heroic Ryuga seeing him in such a subservient position is mortifying. He attempts a clumsy escape, claiming he left his phone at home and can't remember his own number, but she isn't buying the excuse for a second. Because of his blatant stalling, she narrows her eyes, her expression hardening into one of cold command. She twirls her stylus with practiced ease, the small plastic tool suddenly feeling like a scepter of absolute authority in her hand. The next moment, she thrusts the stylus forward, pointing it directly at him like a weapon. The rod-like object serves as a silent but unmistakable threat, punctuating her demand for his cooperation. In response to this overwhelming pressure, he can only let out a silent scream of terror as she leans in, her voice a low, insistent whisper demanding his phone number and email address. The ordeal leaves him so shaken that he barely remembers the walk home, the memory a blur of panic and defeat. Later that night, safely back in his room, he finds himself staring at his phone in disbelief. 3 messages have arrived, including a startling image from Tomo, dressed in a provocative bunny girl outfit and seemingly intended for Aikaru, claiming she's looking forward to their cosplay session. The notifications don't stop there. He scrolls to find a message from Kyuka herself, posing in a bikini and perio, and another from Yukizaki, who is cheerfully offering macarons to celebrate a friend's recovery. The sheer volume of social expectations and confusing signals is becoming a heavy burden. He sits slumped over his desk, his face a mask of pure exhaustion and mental fatigue. The weight of being caught between these intense personalities is clearly taking its toll, leaving him looking like a shell of his former self. With a trembling hand, he finally interacts with the device. A simple sent notification appears on the screen, marking the moment he finally caves to the pressure of responding to the digital onslaught. Out of sheer desperation, he had sent a generic, non-committal reply to everyone, simply stating he was looking forward to whatever they had planned. Having done his social duty, he collapses onto his bed, completely spent and dreading what the morning might bring. Standing outside the school building, Ryuji Hinamori explains his new resolve to a skeptical Aikaru. He claims to have purged all his questionable belongings in a desperate attempt to shed his reputation as a perverted loser and become a more serious, respectable person. Aikaru listens with a look of disbelief, questioning if his friend is truly capable of such a drastic change. He strikes a dramatic, self-assured pose, imagining himself as a paragon of elegance. His goal is clear. He must transform his image so that Ryuga won't feel disgusted by him, aiming to replace his perverted loser persona with a clean version of himself as quickly as possible, even as his own subconscious labels him a mere beta male. He decides to take a shortcut through a narrow alleyway, hoping the detour will add to his new, insanely serious aura. However, his path is immediately blocked by Aikaru, who calls out to him, sensing that his friend's sudden change in behavior might be leading him toward more trouble than he realizes. He is suddenly confronted by Elmira, whose immediate reaction is a look of pure disgust. Ryuji's mind races as he realizes he's accidentally triggering flags with yet another heroine, and he desperately concludes that he must maintain a safe distance of at least 5 meters from this battle target to avoid further complications in his already chaotic life. He tries to make a quick escape, but she grabs him firmly, insisting that she has something important to tell him. Panicked, he pleads to be let go, terrified that this interaction is scoring unwanted love points and dragging him deeper into a narrative he wants no part of, while she remains focused on the urgent message she needs to deliver. They find themselves in a dark, oppressive corridor where the atmosphere shifts dramatically. She stops in her tracks, sensing a thick, suffocating miasma and a disturbing presence lurking just ahead, while he begins to wonder if the rumors he's heard about the apostles of hell appearing in the area are actually true. She suggests that they should call for Ryuga and the others to handle the growing threat, but he reminds her that their usual hero is currently occupied. He explains that Ryuga is busy nursing his sister, Hyuka, leaving them to face whatever darkness lies ahead on their own. She is far from the only one in a strange situation. Elsewhere, Tomo Kobayashi strikes a playful pose in a sleek, cat-themed costume. While Ryuga is indeed busy taking care of Hyuka, whose fever has finally broken, the usual high-energy cosplay antics are sure to return once everyone is back to full health. While she remains in her own world, the tension in the alley reaches a breaking point. He watches as Elmira tenses up, sensing a wicked presence nearby. Their fears are realized when a mysterious man in a fedora and sunglasses steps out of the shadows, his smug grin suggesting that he is exactly the kind of dangerous character Ryuji was hoping to avoid. He approaches with a chilling confidence, his presence looming over the two students. Ryuji realizes with a jolt of fear that this is his first time encountering a disciple at such close range, a being that clearly operates outside the laws of the human world. His name, Shurdora, strikes Ryuji as absurdly theatrical, sounding more like the moniker of a low-rent biker gang than a supernatural threat. He imagines the man wearing the name on the back of a jacket, a thought that provides a brief, surreal distraction from the tension. He leans in closer, a wicked smirk playing on his lips as he commands them to remember his face. He promises that he will be the one to devour them both alive, his voice dripping with a predatory malice that makes the air feel heavy. Behind him, the shadows coalesce into a gargantuan, boar-like monstrosity that erupts with a deafening roar. The creature, identified as the executioner for Elmira McCartney, towers over the alleyway, its massive form radiating a pure, dark intent. She remains undaunted by the beast's appearance, recalling how she has bested his kind in the past. As she prepares to fight, Ryuji watches in disbelief as her body begins to emit an intense, searing heat, confirming that she is far from an ordinary girl. She lunges forward, her hands wreathed in brilliant, magical flames as she confronts the bloodkin of eternal darkness. The alleyway is momentarily transformed into a furnace, the heat of her resolve clashing against the cold, menacing aura of the shadow beast. But the display of power is short-lived, and she collapses to her knees, gasping for air as the flames flicker out. Ryuji realizes with horror that she has run out of energy, her strength depleted because she hasn't been able to feed on Ryuga's blood recently. He is struck by a wave of guilt, realizing that his own constant interference and perverted antics have kept Ryuga occupied, inadvertently starving Elmira of the sustenance she needs to maintain her supernatural abilities. The man laughs at their desperate situation, his confidence swelling as he mocks Ryuji's helplessness. He sees no threat in the overconfident schmuck standing before him and prepares to end the confrontation with a final, decisive strike from his beast. She pleads with him to run and save himself, but he refuses to abandon her to such a fate. Stealing his nerves, Ryuji steps forward to shield her, determined to prove that he is more than just a bystander in this supernatural purge. He stands defiantly, shouting that he will handle the situation. He asserts his role as her protector and advisor, refusing to let her be consumed by the darkness or the whims of their pursuer. As the massive shadow beast lunges with a guttural roar, he scoops her up in his arms and bolts. The creature's dark mass crashes into the ground where they stood moments before, sending debris flying. While sprinting away from the pursuing monster, he explains that their only option is to flee. She clings to him, bewildered by his sudden decisiveness and the sheer speed of their retreat as the beast snaps at their heels. He maneuvers through the environment with calculated precision, noting that the beast, much like a charging boar, lacks the agility to make sharp turns. He uses this weakness to his advantage, narrowly avoiding its heavy, clumsy strikes. The young man's movements become a blur of superhuman athleticism as he leaps across rooftops and scales walls with ease. She watches in disbelief, unable to reconcile his ordinary appearance with such extraordinary physical prowess. Having gained a momentary reprieve, he sets her down and begins to unbutton his school blazer. He knows the man in the fedora will soon catch up, and he must prepare for the next phase of his desperate plan to buy them more time. She gazes up at him from the ground, her breath hitching as she questions his true nature and how he can move like a superhuman. He dismisses her awe with a simple shrug, claiming to be nothing more than an ordinary person despite the evidence to the contrary. He continues to strip away his outer layers, explaining that while he lacks raw strength, his reflexes have always been his greatest asset. She remains flustered, her face flushing a deep crimson as she tries to process the bizarre turn of events. With a determined look, he begins to remove his shirt, stating firmly that this is something he must do. She recoils in shock, her heart racing as she demands to know why he is undressing in such a dire and inappropriate moment. He stands before her in his undershirt, his expression serious as he makes a startling request for her to draw blood from him. She is overwhelmed with embarrassment, stammering about her lack of experience while her face burns with a frantic blush. He confirms the offer with a blunt affirmation, acknowledging that while his blood might not taste as pleasant as Ryuga's, it is their only viable option. Elmira stares at him in disbelief, her face flushed as the reality of his self-sacrificing proposal sinks in. She stammers a protest, explaining the taboo of taking blood from anyone other than Ryuga, but he dismisses her hesitation immediately. He argues that the current emergency overrides any such rules and promises to take full responsibility if Ryuga becomes angry, urging her to act before it is too late. He points out that neither of them wants to perish in this place and reminds her that she is the only one with the power to defeat the apostle. She looks at him, her expression softening as she realizes he is truly doing this out of a desire to help her. Closing the distance, she brings her lips to his exposed neck, her breath hitching as she prepares to cross a line she never intended to. She wraps her arms around him in a tight embrace, finally surrendering to the necessity of the moment and whispering her intent to take a bite. As she begins to feed, the quiet of the corridor is broken only by the rhythmic sounds of her drinking. He sits still, supporting her weight as his strength begins to ebb away into her. The feeding becomes far more intense than he anticipated, and he notices a strange, ecstatic glow in her eyes as she drinks deeply from him. He starts to feel a creeping chill through his limbs and a fading of his vision, realizing with a start that he might actually be in danger of losing too much blood. Ikaru is pinned down, his face contorted in a silent scream of agony as Elmira sinks her teeth into his neck. He feels his life force draining away, certain that this is the end for him. He pleads for her to stop, wondering if she hasn't had enough already. He feels her finally pull away, straddling him with a dazed, almost intoxicated expression, wiping a stray drop of blood from her lip. She muses that while she isn't fully satisfied, his blood might actually be a better vintage than Ryuga's. She continues her critique, describing the sensation of his blood as smooth, light, and refreshing. Her words sound more like a beverage advertisement than a predator's boast, leaving him completely bewildered and physically spent as he groans in protest. She and the boy are suddenly eclipsed by a massive, dark silhouette that looms over them, shattering the moment of strange levity. It is the Apostle of Hell, who declares that their game of tag has ended and a much more lethal version of hide-and-seek is about to begin. The monster ignores his pleas, vowing to tear them apart and present their remains to Ryuga as a grim trophy. While the creature looms, he tries to alert the still dazed girl to the danger, even as the sheer pressure of the malice makes every cell in his body shiver. The beast pauses mid-threat, its glowing eye narrowing as it focuses intensely on the boy pinned to the ground. It realizes that he emanates a strange, unexpected aura, a discovery that leaves the victim even more confused as he stares up at the towering nightmare. Shurdora stares at the beastly form of Ikaru, his mind racing with disbelief. He wonders if his eyes are playing tricks on him, but the presence before him feels undeniably real. Ikaru, trapped in his monstrous state, snarls with impatience, demanding that the man simply speak his mind. Nearby, the young man finds himself in an increasingly compromising position as Elmira clings to him with supernatural strength. He pleads with her to stop, his face flushed with embarrassment as he begs her not to put him in any more suggestive situations. He is acutely aware of the dangerous narrative flags such intimacy might trigger. He remains trapped in her grasp, his thoughts spiraling as he realizes he may have already inadvertently set a series of events in motion. The fear of being linked to the Apostles of Hell weighs heavily on him, especially if his current predicament is discovered by the wrong people. Suddenly, a violent eruption of flames consumes the area, a technique known as the Flamed Sonata Rhapsody. The intense heat and light blind everyone present, as Elmira and the boy are caught in the center of the inferno. Amidst the roaring fire, Shurdora watches with a sadistic grin, finding the screams of his victims to be like music to his ears. The boy, witnessing the brutal treatment of the transformed Ikaru, is filled with a desperate need to intervene and stop the man's cruelty. As the flames begin to flicker out, the girl stands frozen in shock, her eyes wide as she surveys the aftermath. The boy breathes a sigh of relief, believing that the immediate threat from the Apostle of Hell has finally subsided. His relief is short-lived when a new, authoritative voice cuts through the silence. He turns toward the sound, catching a glimpse of a figure approaching through the smoke and debris. The newcomer is revealed to be Tomo, though she carries an intensity far beyond her usual athletic demeanor. She explains that she had contacted Ryuga as a precaution, and as he arrives at the scene, she prepares to hand over the final blow to him after dealing with the intruder herself. She is consumed by a cold, radiant fury, her eyes glowing with a terrifying power. She declares that the intruder has incurred her wrath for laying hands on her friends, and with a final, chilling command, she orders him to vanish. She stands amidst the wreckage, watching as the threat finally dissipates into the air. The school building behind her bears the scars of the intense confrontation, but the immediate danger has passed. Turning her attention to her fallen comrades, she rushes to Ikaru's side, her voice a mix of relief and frustration as she scolds him for his recklessness while checking his injuries. Ryuji watches, still processing the sudden shift from life-threatening peril to this familiar, chaotic domesticity. The tension shifts to a different kind of heat as Elmira clings tightly to Ikaru, much to the blonde girl's visible annoyance. Elmira seems entirely unfazed by the previous battle, instead focusing on the physical comfort of their companion, while Ryuji wonders if he's the only one who finds the sudden change in atmosphere jarring. Elmira's eyes sparkle with a strange, newfound enthusiasm as she begins rambling about her appreciation for certain types of relationships, leaving Ryuji to sigh in exasperation at her eccentricities. Despite the gravity of what they just faced, the group seems to be sliding back into their usual, bizarre dynamics. As the group begins to settle, Ryuji turns to Ryuga, his voice low as he prepares to ask a question that has been weighing on him since the fight began. The conversation takes a sharp, unexpected turn when Elmira points directly at the blonde girl and makes a startling request. She wants permission to regularly consume Ikaru's blood. The request hangs in the air, met with a stunned silence from the others. With a predatory glint in her eyes, Elmira explains that his blood provides a sensation unlike any other, a high that she finds irresistible. Her expression is one of pure, unadulterated craving. Before anyone can protest, she lunges forward, claiming that his essence is the key to supercharging her own flame-based abilities. Tomo immediately moves to intercept, shouting that such a thing is absolutely unacceptable, regardless of the tactical benefits. A frantic tug-of-war ensues, with both girls grappling over the bewildered Ikaru as Elmira insists on making him her exclusive donor. Ryuji can only watch from the sidelines, his face a mask of disbelief at the sheer absurdity of the scene unfolding before him. Amidst the shouting and the scuffling, Ryuji finds himself spiraling into a quiet existential crisis, questioning his own role in this increasingly strange narrative. He wonders if he is destined to remain a mere observer, a mob character caught in the wake of these larger-than-life personalities, or if there is something more to his presence here. He stands caught between his companions as they delve deeper into the lore of their world. Elmira leans in close to him, her voice a conspiratorial whisper as she discusses the Apostle of Hell and their plot to resurrect the evil spirit. It is whispered that this entity might even be the final boss they are destined to face. While Tomo listens intently from his other side, he feels a bead of sweat roll down his temple as the weight of their situation settles in. Beside him, Tomo remains silent, her expression uncharacteristically somber. It is an established fact in their reality that the female main character is often someone closer to the protagonist than any of the other heroines, a realization that adds a layer of complexity to their current dynamic. While the two of them process the gravity of the situation, Elmira remains far more interested in the dramatic potential, her eyes sparkling with a mischievous delight. She loudly proclaims that two rivals locking eyes is the height of excitement and a perfect development for a story's climax. Her outburst is met only with a sharp, weary command from him to finally be quiet. Elsewhere, under the cold glow of the city lights, a young woman with long twin tails stares intently at her phone. A sense of unease gnaws at her as she realizes Shurdora isn't answering her calls. She briefly wonders if he was too reckless and met his end at the hands of Hinamori's group, but she quickly dismisses the thought as impossible. Ryuzuki stands before Kobayashi, her usual school attire replaced by a daring bunny suit, complete with fishnet stockings and a bow tie. She playfully suggests he put some carrots in her outfit, eager to show off her new look. Kobayashi, though slightly flustered, remains polite, apologizing for their lack of recent time together, while she dismisses his concern with a casual way. Back in their standard school uniforms, the two walk through the halls. Kobayashi reveals a significant change in his habits, explaining that he has shredded his meticulous notes on other girls. When Ryuzaki asks what prompted this, he simply states that those records are no longer necessary. He looks at her with newfound clarity, his gaze lingering on her delicate features. In his mind, the realization is absolute. The data on other girls has lost its value. For him, she is now the only one who truly matters. As they continue their conversation, he elaborates on his decision. He admits that those notes were originally intended for a typical male protagonist, but since other heroines have begun gravitating toward him anyway, the documentation has become redundant. His interactions with the other girls remain supportive and friendly. Shirori and Yukimiya approach him with bright smiles, urging him to believe in himself and his friends as they prepare for an upcoming battle, confident in their collective victory. Even Shidura seeks his input, though her questions are of a more trivial nature. She asks his opinion on the current fashion for swimsuits, to which he provides a blunt and somewhat eccentric answer: pea green. The response leaves her visibly baffled, her expression twisting into a comical grimace as she makes a strange, guttural sound. He can only watch with a bead of nervous sweat, realizing his fashion sense might be somewhat lacking. Elsewhere in the school, Mito stumbles through the corridor, his posture slumped and his expression weary. He senses a shift in the air, a premonition that the evil spirit is nearing a revival, an event that he believes will coincide with his own awakening. He pauses, lost in a dark spiral of thought. He begins to entertain a startling theory, that he might actually be the last boss of this entire narrative. It would explain the strange events and why a mere side character like himself is suddenly triggering romantic flags with the heroines. The weight of this possibility settles on him, as he wonders if he is destined to eventually stand against Ryuzaki and the others. He begins to piece together the anomalies, questioning how his friend could have witnessed so many secret conflicts without ever being detected. It seems impossible for a normal student to have been present in so many dangerous situations without being caught. His suspicion grows as he recalls the hypnotic influence of the disciples, a power that should have easily ensnared an ordinary person, yet his friend remained completely unaffected by the mental manipulation. Furthermore, he wonders how a mere student could possess the uncanny ability to detect the malevolent intent of an apostle, a feat far beyond the capabilities of a bystander. Collapsing under the weight of these contradictions, he realizes that no common background character could possibly achieve such feats, leading him to a single, terrifying conclusion. A terrifying realization washes over him, his face contorting in a mask of pure shock as the truth becomes undeniable. He is not a normal person. In the vast, dark silence of his own mind, he feels small and isolated by this new understanding. He envisions a tragic end where he, possessed by an evil spirit, is finally struck down by the heroines, thanking them with his final breath for releasing him from the darkness and accepting his role as the defeated villain. Despite the grim vision, he flails in a momentary panic, lamenting his youth but ultimately accepting that if he must be the new enemy, he will stand against them as the story demands. Meanwhile, Ryuzaki is overcome with grief, her eyes welling with tears as she mourns the bond they once shared, wishing for at least one final memory to hold on to after the chaotic end of their friendship. Stepping out into the city, he resolves to find the truth and confirm his suspicions, determined to face whatever destiny awaits him with a clear heart and no more fear. He had separated from Ryuzaki and the others, spending his time wandering through various environments, from the depths of the water to the city streets, driven by a singular purpose. He remembered the effort it took to slip away from Shidura's watchful eyes. His objective was clear: locate the Apostles of Hell and make contact, hoping to finally confirm his true identity as the story's ultimate antagonist, though he kept a mental escape plan ready just in case. After 5 long days of searching, he found himself standing before the familiar, looming silhouette of the abandoned factory where Shidura had once been defeated. It was late, nearly 9 in the evening, when a subtle shift in the air caught his attention. He stepped cautiously into the dark interior, his senses immediately overwhelmed by a thick, oppressive, evil aura permeating the space. Peering into the gloom, he called out to the shadows, spotting a lone figure standing amidst the ruins. He watched as the figure, a girl in a school uniform, moved with an odd, rhythmic hopping motion. Suspecting she might be one of the disciples he sought, he steeled his resolve to approach her and proceed with his plan. He stood before her, noting the jarring contrast between her ordinary school attire and the palpable malice she projected. She looked at him with a predatory smirk, questioning the foolishness of a mere human wandering into such a place alone and suggesting they indulge in some fun to alleviate her boredom. She closed the distance between them, her gaze piercing as she challenged him to look at her and describe what he felt. She questioned whether he even understood the gravity of his own situation or the danger he was in. She leaned in until their faces were mere inches apart, her presence suffocating. Startled by the sudden intimacy, he stammered a question about her intentions, to which she responded with a cryptic, teasing inquiry of her own. He felt a cold realization wash over him. The aura she emitted was undeniable, confirming that Shidura's earlier warnings had been grounded in truth. There was something profoundly wrong with the girl standing before him. He looked her in the eye and asked point-blank if her intention was to end his life. She simply tilted her head, a playful yet unsettling smile on her face, and softly admitted that she couldn't. She stands before Mito, who is visibly trembling, his face slick with sweat as he presses for an explanation. He admits he had expected her to confirm that the evil spirit resided within him, a dark king waiting to be unleashed. She tilts her head, a look of genuine bewilderment crossing her face as she questions why he would even ask such things. While she acknowledges a certain similarity between them, his line of questioning remains utterly baffling to her. She watches as the small boy nearby freezes, his eyes wide with a sudden, sharp realization that shatters his expectations. The possibility that he is not the last boss hits him like a physical blow, leaving him reeling in shock. He lunges forward, grabbing Mito's arm in a desperate, frantic grip as he demands to be put at ease. His voice rises in a panicked plea, begging for confirmation of his role while the girl, identifying herself as Mayan, watches the display with growing impatience. The girl sighs, admitting that this last boss terminology is foreign to her, yet she is certain about one thing. If his concerns are centered on the evil spirit, then his assumptions are fundamentally flawed. She explains that while the malevolent entity indeed requires a human vessel to manifest in this world, it does not dwell within the boy. This revelation leaves him looking utterly hollow, his worldview crumbling in an instant. He stares blankly as his grand ambitions turn to ash, his carefully laid plan to contact disciples and ascend as the ultimate antagonist has been rendered meaningless. The realization that his destiny has been snatched away leaves him in a state of silent, wide-eyed despair. The blonde girl lets out a chilling, confident chuckle, her eyes narrowing as she reveals that a suitable vessel for the evil spirit has already been secured. She anticipates the look of pale terror that will surely wash over Hinamori's face when the truth is finally unveiled. He erupts in a fit of denial, his small fist clenching as he screams that it must be a lie. He clings to his scripted fate, insisting that he is meant to face Ryuga in a final, climactic battle where his defeat would lead to his eventual salvation. The boy collapses into a childish tantrum, kicking and flailing on the ground in a desperate rejection of this new reality. He rails against the heavens, cursed by the fact that he has been cast in the wrong role, while the others look on at his pathetic display of broken pride. He clings to her waist, sobbing uncontrollably as his reality crumbles. He begs her not to leave him, desperate for some sense of purpose now that his last boss title has been stripped away. She, bewildered by the sudden outburst, demands to know what kind of character he's supposed to be if not the ultimate evil. In his frantic state, he shoves his face against her, prompting a shriek of outrage as she accuses him of trying to peek at her undergarments. Mayan watches the pathetic display with a smirk, pointing out that an actual apostle of darkness wouldn't be interested in such human trivialities, further proving his mundane nature. The girl finally loses her patience and kicks him away, sending him sprawling across the floor in a heap of tears and snot. He wails about his bleak future, while Mayan continues to mock him, claiming she's the one who truly wants to cry at the sight of such a miserable villain. Later that night, under the cold glow of a full moon, the chaos has subsided. Aikiru sits alone against a cold stone wall, his head bowed in exhaustion, while Ryuga stands nearby. She breaks the silence, her gaze fixed on him with a mixture of suspicion and genuine curiosity. She wonders aloud what he truly is, sensing that despite his unassuming appearance, he is far from an ordinary student. Joining him on the ground, she tries to offer some semblance of comfort, telling him not to overthink the situation. Ikaru remains silent, his mind racing as he realizes that too many narrative flags have been triggered, pushing him past the point of no return. She leans in closer, her expression softening as she urges him not to lose heart. She reminds him of the dire stakes, warning that if the true evil spirit ever fully revives, the entire world will face certain destruction. With a sudden flash of her usual bravado, she declares that there is no need for fear because the hero, Ryuga, will be the one to strike the evil spirit down. Ikaru can only offer a weary, half-hearted look, clearly drained by her relentless energy. The conversation shifts as she asks about his connection to Hinamori Ryuga, but he quickly shuts the topic down, his voice tinged with bitterness. He mentions that he's even lost contact with Shidura, his former subordinate, and simply wants to be left alone. Seeing his genuine distress, her resolve wavers, and a look of pity crosses her face. She admits that she can't bring herself to kill him and expresses a growing concern for his well-being, realizing she can't simply abandon him to face whatever comes next on his own. The apostle pulls him closer, her voice a mix of exasperation and comfort as she guides his head onto her lap. The young man, overwhelmed by the night's events, finds himself resting against her, feeling the gentle pat of her hand on his hair as he seeks a moment of respite from his burdens. He lies there in the dead of night, tears still fresh as he sulks in the unexpected comfort of a lap pillow provided by Mayoni. A sense of dread mingles with his sorrow. He realizes that if Ryuga or any of the other girls were to witness this intimate moment with an apostle of hell, the consequences would be dire. She leans over him, her gaze shifting from his face to his ear, only to comment bluntly on the surprising amount of earwax she discovers. Flustered and deeply embarrassed, he stammers a response, his face flushing at the mundane observation in such a heavy moment. Seeing his discomfort, she offers with a hint of playfulness to clean it for him, turning a somber night into a strangely domestic scene. Ikaru stares at his phone, reading a message from Ryuzaki. She tells him not to feel pressure to reply immediately and suggests they focus on the apostles later to preserve their current dynamic. He looks utterly drained by the exchange. He has been confined to his room for 3 days, eschewing food and sleep in a desperate attempt to avoid triggering any narrative flags. Despite the neglect, he is struck by how well his young body is holding up under the strain. He gazes into the distance, realizing that his physical state is the least of his concerns. The true problem is that his intended role in this world has completely derailed, and he has no idea where things went wrong. A sudden, thunderous crash shatters the silence, the force of the impact sending him tumbling across the floor. Picking himself up from the floor, he tries to make sense of the shock, wondering if a meteor or a high-speed sumo wrestler just struck his house. Even amidst the confusion, his thoughts are consumed by the challenge of framing Ryuzaki as the story's protagonist. His phone begins to ring, and he answers to find a panicked Ryuzaki on the line, inexplicably dressed in a revealing sumo-style outfit. She screams about a dire emergency, leaving him completely bewildered by both her words and her appearance. Her voice is thick with terror as she delivers a shocking update. Hyuka has undergone a dark transformation and has become the evil god. She reveals that the enemy was closer than they ever suspected, having chosen the young boy as a vessel for this ancient malice. A terrifying turn of events that had even caught the attention of Maya. The weight of this reality finally settles on him as he sits alone in his room. He realizes that in his confusion, he had failed to truly process the fact that Hyuka was the ultimate antagonist all along. He listens intently as the explanation continues over the line. Ryuzaki and Shidura are on the move, their blades at the ready as they navigate the chaos. Ryuzaki explains the heavy burden of the Hinamori clan, who serve as vessels for the dragon god, much like how the malevolent deity has now claimed a host. She continues, her voice trembling with urgency as she reveals that Hyuka's very conscience has been submerged by this ancient evil. The girl has fled toward the riverside, leaving a trail of dread in her wake. Hearing this, he grips the receiver tighter, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Ryozaki's voice crackles with a desperate warning, telling him to stay indoors at all costs. The streets are now a labyrinth of otherworldly portals and fanatical disciples. The truth is unavoidable now. The young boy he knew is indeed the final threat. The intensity of the situation is mirrored in the fierce, weathered face of the elder Ryuga, whose expression is a mask of pure, righteous fury. The gravity of the evil god's emergence has pushed everyone to their absolute limit. He remains in the quiet of his room, contemplating the bond between the sisters. He knows Ryuzaki could never bring herself to strike down the one she loves, especially since Hyuka represents the very normalcy they are fighting to protect. He wonders if his role is simply to remain a bystander, safe within these walls. However, the thought of being sidelined gnaws at him. If he stays hidden while the world burns, he risks losing the fragile connection he has built, fading back into the background as nothing more than a distant acquaintance rather than the partner he aspires to be. His gaze sharpens, a new resolve burning in his eyes. He refuses to be a mere spectator in this unfolding tragedy. He is her support, her self-proclaimed partner, and he will not let that title be stripped away by cowardice. With a decisive motion, he pulls on his school blazer, adjusting his tie with steady hands. He realizes that even a supporting player can shift the tides of fate, and whether he serves as a guide or a sacrifice, he must find a way to be useful to the story reaching its conclusion. He charges out into the fray, his previous hesitation replaced by a reckless determination to assert himself. He is willing to put his very life on the line, shouting a silent promise to catch up to the others and fulfill his role. The city before him is a scene of utter pandemonium, with citizens fleeing in terror as the supernatural influence takes hold. As he navigates the panicked crowds, his senses sharpen, picking up the dark resonance of the evil spirit nearby, driving him forward to find Ryuzaki and prevent further tragedy. He watches in disbelief as a massive, ape-like beast tosses a car aside like a toy, realizing the chaos has reached its peak. Hearing a familiar voice amidst the wreckage, he grits his teeth and resolves to confront the source of the disturbance, even as the air grows heavy with a strange presence. Suddenly, thick, thorny vines erupt from the ground, ensnaring the rampaging creature in a crushing grip that silences its roars. The young woman responsible for the attack steps forward, identifying herself as the Miko of Destiny. She explains her ability to manipulate life energy, either granting vitality or stripping it away to bind her foes. With a cold determination, she executes a binding technique that leaves the beast howling in agony, much to his shock at the sheer brutality and name of the move. As strange creatures emerge from the shadows, he observes that her power has grown significantly, though he notes with concern that the woman who once only cared about following others has gained a terrifying new edge. He looks around in despair, realizing they are surrounded by an impossible number of these monstrous apostles, wondering how the situation could have escalated so quickly. From the darkness, a booming voice declares the resurrection of the evil god, claiming the world is now theirs as 5 gates have been opened and hundreds of followers have cornered the Miko. She responds to the threat with a sharp, callous insult, causing him to worry that her newfound strength is making her increasingly mean-spirited and insensitive to the gravity of their plight. Without a moment's hesitation, she launches a devastating final strike, the air crackling with cosmic energy as she aims to end the conflict with a single, thrilling blow. She watches as the young man unleashes a flurry of strikes, his movements a blur as he kicks and punches the shadowy assailants. The enemies recoil in confusion, unable to comprehend how a seemingly ordinary student possesses such overwhelming physical force. Because of this sudden display of power, she can only stare in disbelief while he realizes that this chaos has provided the perfect opening to act. Seeing his hesitation, the girl with the bouquet urges him to leave this location to her and go support their ally, Ryuga, insisting that she will be fine on her own. He responds by delivering a devastating kick to a dark, lupin creature, clearing a path while she watches in silent awe of his effortless strength. As the wind begins to pick up, she explains that this is the only way they can secure victory in this struggle, her expression softening despite the surrounding conflict. Meanwhile, the Miko of Destiny exerts her will, conjuring thick, thorny vines that ensnare and crush the remaining monsters in a display of botanical fury. She knows her strength is waning and that these bindings will not hold forever. After witnessing her magic, he shouts his thanks and tells the girl with the flowers to find safety before he sprints toward the next battlefield. She watches him go, her face flushing a deep crimson as she shyly suggests that he should refer to her by her first name, Shirori. Behind him, the fallen enemies groan in frustration, cursing his bizarre presence and the fact that he defeated them using nothing but his bare hands. As he moves further into the fray, a man with an intense, shadowed gaze appears, declaring his arrival as an assistant to Hinamori Ryuga. He stands resolute, his voice booming with a vow of ultimate sacrifice for those he deems worthy. Having neutralized the opposition with nothing but his raw physical power, he remains a pillar of unwavering, if somewhat melodramatic, support. While his ally holds the line, Ikaru sprints through the thinning crowds of the park, his mind racing as fast as his feet. He has already dispatched scores of disciples, and now his senses are drawn toward a concentrated aura of malice emanating from the heart of the city. As he moves, he realizes that the heroines are occupied elsewhere, leaving a gap in the support Ryuga desperately needs. He decides then to shoulder their burdens himself, ensuring that the primary combatants can focus entirely on the threat ahead. With a sudden burst of speed, he lunges forward, driven by the tactical necessity of reuniting the heroines with Ryuga. He knows that their presence is a shield, as the young spirit Kyuka seems unable or unwilling to strike at them directly. A grim smile touches his lips as he fully embraces his role. The desire for a normal, quiet life has been cast aside in favor of becoming the ultimate meddler. He is determined to be the invisible hand that guides the main players through this final, cataclysmic confrontation. This resolve manifests in a series of calculated interventions as he appears behind the scenes to bolster the heroines, allowing them to regroup and find their footing. It is the work of a professional supporter, operating in the shadows to ensure the light of the heroes never wavers. From a distance, he watches the fruits of his labor as the heroines converge, their combined presence unlocking a potential far greater than any of them could achieve alone. They stand ready for the final clash against the encroaching darkness of the evil god. The air thickens with ancient power as the legends of the dragon god and the celestial guardians begin to resonate. Yet, amidst these grand myths, a lingering question remains about the true nature of the young man who has orchestrated this unity from the sidelines. Suddenly, the ground trembles under the weight of a massive presence, a physical manifestation of sheer, unadulterated force. In this moment of peak tension, a tidal of immense weight hangs in the air, heralding the arrival of a force known only as the strongest power. Ikaru speaks into his microphone, recounting a bizarre and disgusting incident involving noodles and his nose while searching for the heroines. He then comes across a gruesome scene in the city streets, where the remains of apostles are melting away. From the shadows, a sinister presence observes him, sensing a massive amount of malice and strength nearby. This presence reveals herself as a formidable woman with wings, acknowledging the dancing fencer's skill in defeating numerous apostles with just a stick. Shidura stands ready, her expression grim as she faces this new threat. She radiates a powerful, dark energy that Ikaru immediately recognizes as a sign of a high-ranking enemy. He struggles to place where he has encountered this girl boss before, her aura feeling strangely familiar. His thoughts take a more observational, albeit distracted, turn as he notes the details of her appearance, frustrated that certain aspects remain obscured from his current vantage point. Because of this obstruction, he remains unable to confirm his suspicions, his mind wandering even as the tension of the encounter rises. While his head is being tended to, he tries to recall the exact moment of their previous meeting. The memory of a soft, pillow-like comfort flashes through his mind, providing a startling clue to her identity. Suddenly, the standoff breaks into violence as Shidura lunges forward, her blade a blur of motion against the winged woman. Ikaru watches in alarm, shouting for her to be careful. Despite the ferocity of the attack, the woman remains unfazed, her smile widening as she reveals her true status as one of the 3 princesses of the Abyss. The young man can only stare in shock as the name Mayan escapes his lips. She hovers above the battlefield, her presence a dark weight as she mocks the dancing fencer for her lack of speed. While Ikaru watches in disbelief, the winged girl prepares to assert her dominance, her mind racing as she connects the dots between the 3 princesses of the Abyss and the apostles she's encountered. Deciding the skirmish has gone on long enough, the winged princess prepares to deliver a final blow. Below her, Shidura stands grounded, her wooden sword seemingly useless against an opponent who commands the sky, while Ikaru watches in despair, realizing that without a way to close the distance, his ally is a sitting duck. However, the fencer is far from defeated, centering her spirit as she begins to chant the incantation for a hidden technique. A pillar of white light erupts around her, the air itself beginning to vibrate with intense pressure. With a sudden, violent motion, she releases the built-up energy in a technique she calls Blade Sonic. A massive vertical shockwave tears through the air, surging toward the heavens with lethal intent. She watches as the suddenness of the ranged assault catches the princess off guard, forcing her to bank sharply to avoid the brunt of the blast. From the sidelines, Ikaru and Mito watch the display of power with wide eyes, stunned by the sheer scale of the destruction. They watch as the winged girl, having narrowly escaped, hovers amidst the smoke, frustrated that the attack managed to sever several strands of her long, white hair. High above, the young spirit boy watches the exchange with a critical eye, noting her uncharacteristic sloppiness. They lock eyes, a new level of mutual respect, or perhaps just heightened caution, passing between them. The princess admits that the Blade Sonic is a genuine threat, acknowledging that her opponent is no mere apostle. She grips her wooden blade with renewed confidence, explaining the nature of her awakening. She is no longer bound by the reach of her steel. As the dancing fencer, she can now manipulate the very airwaves to strike from a distance. The fencer's transformation, observed from a distance, leaves Ikaru with a pang of inadequacy, wondering if all his companions underwent some miraculous growth while he was hiding away. It seems the stakes of their conflict have shifted, leaving him to catch up with their newfound strength. He can't help but find the dramatic names they've chosen for their techniques, like Blade Sonic and Tree Binding Execution, to be a bit over the top. It is a small, grounding thought in a world that is rapidly spiraling into chaos. Shidura strikes a dramatic pose, her voice ringing out with a command to transform. Nearby, Ikaru watches with a mix of disbelief and exhaustion, wondering if she's attempting to distance herself from traditional tropes by adopting such a flamboyant persona. She continues her elaborate ritual, chanting a nonsensical incantation with sparkling enthusiasm. He quickly interjects, urging her to abandon the theatrics because the immediate threat is far too grave for such delays. Despite his own reservations, he feels a sudden surge of resolve, his muscles tensing until the buttons of his blazer snap under the pressure. He realizes that he can no longer remain a mere observer in this conflict. The time for being a background figure has passed. Above them, Mayoni descends with predatory intent, her wings flared as she declares her intention to take the fencer's head. Shidura braces for the impact, but Ikaru remains low to the ground, gathering his strength for an unexpected intervention. He suddenly lunges forward, thrusting himself directly into the path of the 2 combatants while brandishing a simple wooden rod. With a voice full of newfound authority, he commands both the apostle and the fencer to cease their hostilities at once. This sudden interference leaves both women frozen in place, their eyes wide with utter bewilderment at the young man's audacity. He stands firm, feeling an inexplicable power coursing through his veins that confirms his transition away from normalcy. He is no longer surprised by the turn of events, accepting that his role in this world has fundamentally shifted. The transformation is complete, leaving him with a rugged, intensely detailed visage and a booming, archaic manner of speech. He declares that there is no time for hesitation, leaving Shidura and Mayoni staring in stunned silence at the bizarre, heroic figure he has become. Mayoni stands frozen in shock as Shidura reminds her of the impending final confrontation. The weight of the coming battle hangs heavy in the air, casting a shadow over the group. She is then confronted by Shidura, whose voice is sharp with disbelief as she questions Kobayashi's sudden decision to withdraw from the fight. He stands firm, though the tension between them is palpable. Their argument is abruptly cut short by a thunderous presence. The massive figure of Ryuga's brother looms over them, his voice booming with a righteous fury that sends Mayoni into a state of pure panic. He stares them down, his face a mask of stern intensity as he demands to know if they have already forgotten who he is. The girl can only stammer in fear, unable to find the strength to even attempt an attack. Without hesitation, the giant of a man lunges forward, seizing her as he bellows accusations of her past behavior. Kobayashi tries to intervene, but the sheer force of the man's presence is overwhelming. He hoists her into the air with ease, ignoring her desperate pleas to be released. His grip is like iron, and his resolve is unshakable. He continues the interrogation by recounting her supposed acts of kindness toward a wounded warrior, citing the warmth and comfort she once provided, even offering her lap for him to rest while she cleaned his ears. Her face flushes with a mix of embarrassment and terror as she frantically denies every word, claiming it was just a weird misunderstanding. He then threatens a peculiar form of retribution, his fingers poised as if to strike at her most sensitive spots, warning that his touch will bring her to her knees. Her screams of protest fill the air as she realizes the bizarre nature of the assault he intends to unleash, begging him to stop his finger-based harassment. He finally settles the matter with a forceful toss, sending her flying through the air as he declares the issue resolved. As she disappears from view, Kobayashi can't help but offer a final, stray observation on the quality of her thighs, while Shidura watches on in stunned silence, wondering at the absurdity of the scene. Kobayashi stands before Shidura, who urgently presses him to hurry to Ryuga's side. She explains that Ryuga is currently facing the demon god's vessel alone, a vessel that is none other than her own sister. Though his face has returned to its usual state, Kobayashi feels his speech remains somewhat unrefined as he processes the gravity of the situation. He shouts back at her with sudden intensity, questioning if she is truly satisfied sacrificing her life against mere apostles when she should be fighting alongside Ryuga. His bluntness catches her off guard, forcing her to confront her own choices. Because of his words, a strange, fluttering sensation washes over her. She presses a hand to her chest, wondering if his reckless bravery was all for her sake. In response to her realization, she looks at him with a softened, almost tender gaze, acknowledging that he risked everything just to keep her alive. Kobayashi, overwhelmed by the shift in her demeanor, can only offer a series of embarrassed stutters as his face flushes deep red. She gives him a warm, genuine smile, declaring him a true man among men. Though he is flustered by the high praise, she doesn't let him linger, urging him to fly like the wind to reach Ryuga's side before it's too late. Moments later, he takes off at a sprint, shouting back a promise to stay safe. Shidura watches his retreating figure, her expression a mix of confusion and a new, burgeoning emotion. As he disappears into the distance, she clutches her heart, which is pounding uncontrollably against her ribs. She tries to dismiss the feeling, humming a tune to drown out the memory of his bold words, yet the warmth in her chest remains. Meanwhile, as he races across the rooftops, he mentally tallies the remaining threats. Between Shidura and Yukimiya, they have already neutralized about 20 apostles, significantly thinning the ranks of the small fry that poured through the gate. He then considers the third main heroine, Elmira, who is likely also deep in the fray, battling apostles in another part of the city. With so many powerful allies in action, the tide of battle seems to be turning. With the numbers dwindling, he leaps across the urban landscape with renewed purpose. He is confident that there shouldn't be many enemies left to block his path to the final confrontation. He sprints through the desolate landscape, his mind racing with the urgency of the situation. He knows he must gather the heroes at the riverbank before the demon god can summon more enemies through the gate. His goal clear: assist Ryuga in the final confrontation. Suddenly, he skids to a halt as a familiar figure catches his eye. The young man finds Elmira standing alone, her clothes tattered and her expression weary from what must have been a brutal struggle. He approaches cautiously, wondering if he should have arrived sooner to help her. Reaching into his pocket, he offers her some gummy bears, hoping a simple treat might provide some comfort in the midst of the chaos. He is met with a terrifying response as she lunges at him with feral intensity, her teeth bared in a desperate shriek for blood. The sudden shift from exhaustion to predatory hunger is jarring, and he barely manages to keep his balance as she snaps at him like a wild animal. The boy finds himself pursued relentlessly as she demands a bloody bit of blood right this instant, her hunger driving her into a state of aggression that far surpasses the apostles they had previously fought. She looks completely unhinged, her eyes wide with a primal need that ignores everything but the prospect of a meal. She looms over him as he weighs his limited options, feeling a heavy weight of indecision. The choices before him seem stark and impossible, the gravity of her hunger demanding a sacrifice that he isn't sure he can survive. The air grows thick with tension as he stares at her, knowing that whatever path he takes will have immediate and lasting consequences. He decides to appeal to her heart, tears welling in his eyes as he begs her to eventually return to the cheerful girl he knows. He offers himself up as a sacrifice, telling her to drink her fill, but pleading with her not to lose her humanity to this darkness, his voice trembling with the weight of his desperation. His heartfelt plea causes the girl to pause, her aggressive stance softening as his words seem to reach through the haze of her hunger. She looks at him with a glimmer of her old self, whispering a quiet thank you for his kindness as the predatory tension momentarily breaks. She is momentarily distracted as Ryuga's brother arrives on the scene, brimming with a misplaced confidence as he declares his intent to handle things with his skills of negotiation. He remains completely oblivious to the grim reality of the situation, his loud and boastful entrance clashing with the somber atmosphere. The newcomer's presence is ignored as she latches onto the boy's neck with a strength that catches him off guard, her thirst proving to be even more intense than he anticipated. He gasps in pain, feeling the life being drained from him as she feeds with a ferocity that rivals a high-powered machine. He is left reeling after she finally pulls away, a look of pure bliss and satisfaction washing over her face as she exclaims how wonderful the blood tasted. In stark contrast, he stands there looking like a hollow shell of himself, his face pale and gaunt from the ordeal, while she appears fully restored and cheerful once more. She stands over the fallen boy, her energy clearly restored, and asks what he is doing there in such a state. He can only offer a pained groan in response, his body still reeling from the sudden loss of blood. She begins to walk away, chiding him for his recklessness in trying to face the apostles alone. She reassures him that the immediate area seems clear of any evil presence, suggesting the town is safe for the moment. The girl turns back with a vibrant smile and a peace sign, boasting that even a demon god would be no match for her now that she is fully energized. She explains that she is stocked up and ready to join the others, unable to sit idly by while her friends are in danger. Ordering him to evacuate immediately, she sprints off toward the heart of the conflict, leaving the rest of the battle in her hands. He watches her go, barely able to whisper a confirmation of her command. The young man is left alone amidst the ruins, reflecting on the grim irony that his supposed ally, the vampire, proved to be a greater threat to his life than the enemies they were fighting. His rest is interrupted when he notices her jogging back toward him. He wonders if she has already run out of energy or if she is seeking another transfusion to ward off the cold. She leans in close, her expression turning uncharacteristically soft as she thanks him for arriving at the perfect moment to save her. The vampire then whispers a playful, secret request, asking for another taste of his blood once he returns and promising to keep the encounter hidden from their mutual friend. He desperately tries to ignore the suggestion, claiming he heard absolutely nothing. 10 minutes later, he is surprisingly back on his feet and sprinting through the debris. He realizes that while a normal person would be in a hospital bed, his unusually resilient body and mastery over his own aura have allowed him to recover with incredible speed. He pushes forward with renewed determination, knowing he must catch up to the group before the battle is won without him. He pauses for a moment, his brow furrowed in contemplation as he looks back at the site of the recent struggle. A nagging thought crosses his mind regarding the gateway to the other world, which remains wide open and unattended. He wonders if it is truly safe to leave such a rift exposed to the elements. Despite his concerns, he breaks into a run, deciding that the matter must wait for another time. He reasons that he lacks the knowledge to seal the breach anyway, and with the current crisis demanding his immediate attention, he simply cannot afford to linger. He resolves to deal with the consequences later, prioritizing the battle ahead. At the time, he convinces himself that the portal will surely vanish on its own once the demon god is vanquished, as is often the way with such supernatural phenomena. Little does he realize that this single, hurried decision is destined to pave the way for catastrophic failures in the days to come. Kobayashi Ikeru sprints through the open terrain, his mind racing as fast as his feet. He refuses to let his story end as a mere mystery character, his pride as a person demanding that he find a more significant role in the unfolding chaos. He questions his own identity, wondering what it truly means to be himself in a world of heroes and monsters. He continues his desperate search across the grassy fields, feeling the heavy weight of responsibility for having become so deeply involved in these events. Even if there are no easy answers waiting for him, he is determined to find his purpose with his own hands once the dust of battle finally settles. He finally reaches the clearing where Ryuzaki stands alone, her gaze fixed downward in a moment of somber reflection. The other girls are scattered nearby, their presence a silent testament to the gravity of the situation as they watch their friend. He recalls the recent struggle, remembering how it was the first time he had ever seen Ryuzaki appear so vulnerable. However, the other heroines did not hesitate to step forward, lending their strength and fulfilling their roles with a resolve that proved they were exactly where they needed to be. Suddenly, the air grows cold and heavy as a malevolent force manifests. Proclaiming itself as the evil god, a harbinger of chaos, the entity demands the flesh and souls of humanity as a sacrifice, its dark energy crackling like lightning through the sky. Ikeru watches from a distance, paralyzed by indecision as a massive, horned demon looms over the landscape. He knows that if the heroines fall, the world is doomed, yet he finds himself worrying about the mundane destruction of his own home, waiting for some kind of signal to tell him it is finally time to intervene. Despite the overwhelming pressure of the dark god's presence, the girls refuse to yield. Shidura grips her weapon tightly, declaring that she won't let things end this way, while Ikeru observes their bravery, acknowledging that they are truly excellent heroines who are doing everything they can to support their protagonists. The heroines prepare for a final, desperate gambit, each offering their unique essence to bolster Ryuzaki's power. Mayoni pledges the strength of her dark bloodkin, Shidura offers her skill as a swordswoman, and Yukimiya channels the last remnants of her divine authority as the Miko of Destiny. With a unified cry that echoes across the battlefield, they invoke the names of the celestial guardians, Suzaku, Saryu, and Bayako. Their combined spirits flare with brilliant light, focusing all their hopes and power into a single, decisive strike. The three celestial guardians, Suzaku, Saryu, and Byako, erupt into the sky, their massive, ethereal forms casting long shadows over the combatants. Ikiru stands amidst the dust, his eyes scanning the divine display as he realizes that the quartet is incomplete without the black tortoise, Genbu. He shifts his gaze toward Ryuzaki, concluding that since she embodies the central power, she cannot also be the missing guardian. His thoughts are interrupted by the sight of the young spirit boy casually playing with a mechanical turtle toy, almost as if mocking the absence of the final protector. He observes the manifestation of the Kuryu, the yellow dragon that governs the four cardinal gods from the center. It is described as a jack of all trades that can utilize the powers of all the heroines, acting as the sovereign heart of their combined spiritual essence. He continues to ponder the imbalance, wondering why Genbu is absent from this divine assembly. He questions the logic of the battlefield, unable to understand why the black tortoise hasn't appeared to complete the quartet of guardians. A sudden, preposterous realization washes over him, prompting a dramatic pose as a glowing Genbu sigil manifests above his head. He begins to wonder if fate has a twist in store, specifically, if he, the background character, is destined to take up the mantle of the black tortoise. As the golden aura intensifies around him, he reflects on the nature of his world, noting that it is common for a supporting figure to receive a sudden elevation in status to aid the hero during a climax. He feels the surge of power, accepting that his role is about to change fundamentally. He focuses his energy, his stance widening as he prepares for the physical toll of the transformation. Every muscle tenses in anticipation of the coming conflict. He begins a series of casual stretches in the background while the heroines rally their spirits for a final assault. Despite the gravity of the situation, he decides he can't just stay on the sidelines anymore and prepares to join the fray in his own unique way. He watches as the young boy, Hyuka, taunts the group, revealing that Ryuzaki's connection to the Kuryu makes her vulnerable to any direct assault on him. The realization of her weakened state hangs heavy in the air as the enemy prepares to strike. Suddenly, a blinding pillar of dark energy erupts, threatening to consume everything in its path. From the sidelines, the other heroines cry out in desperation, urging their friend to flee the impending destruction before it's too late. As the light intensifies, she stands frozen, her defensive aura completely vanished. Observing from a distance, the young man realizes that as the guardian Genbu, his role is to be the shield, the armor that protects the core when all else fails. Without a second thought, he lunges forward, his body a blur as he positions himself directly between the girl and the cataclysmic blast. A faint, confident smile plays on his lips as he prepares to face the brunt of the god's wrath. In the quiet space of his mind, he reflects on the nature of fear, dismissing the threat of the evil god as trivial. To him, the only thing truly worth fearing isn't death or pain, but the prospect of fading away as a mere background character without ever making his mark on the world. The impact is instantaneous and agonizing, a violent explosion of force that tears through his body. Blood sprays as he lets out a guttural scream of pure anguish, his attempt at a heroic battle cry lost in the sheer, unadulterated pain of the moment. The force of the blow sends him spiraling through the air like a broken doll, his consciousness flickering as he realizes the gravity of his gamble. Below, the girl he sought to protect watches in stunned silence, her voice trembling as she questions why he would throw his life away for her. Her scream echoes across the battlefield, a desperate plea for him to wake up as his limp form begins its final descent. It seems the grand awakening of the Celestial Guardian was nothing more than a tragic, short-lived delusion that has ended in disaster. However, as he lies amidst the rubble, a strange sense of calm washes over him. Despite the blood and the initial shock, he realizes with a start that he is virtually unharmed, his only real regret being the uncool way he shrieked when the blast first hit.